Welcome back to Renegade Exegesis with your hosts, Bertrand
and Theophlon.
What's up, folks? We're on a little bit of a hiatus there. Holiday shiz got in the way, and we both have, jobs and stuff like that. We're going to go ahead and pull up our chapters. We're doing Isaiah 13, 14, and 15 today. Fair warning ahead of time, folks. These are, not, happy chapters. I mean, the Bible, it can be pretty dark a lot of the time, but these are a little bit extra dark. Anyway, let's hop right into it. Let's see, how long is this is chapter 13?
It's pretty short, I think, relatively speaking.
Not too long. How many verses are we
22.
looking at? You want to take the first 11 verses?
Sure. So, chapter 13, the oracle concerning Babylon that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw.
Real quick, so we're switching gears here, where we were talking about Assyria mostly up until now. Switching gears, we're talking about Babylon now.
There's mention of Assyria
later on here,
but
but it is up until now. I think we've mostly been focused on Assyria, so we're kind of switching to Babylon here.
Anywho, the oracle concerning Babylon that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw. On a bare hill, raise a signal, cry aloud to them, wave the hand for them to enter the gates of the nobles. I myself have commanded my consecrated ones, have summoned my warriors, my proudly exalting ones, to execute my anger. Listen, a tumult on the mountains as of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar of kingdoms, of nations gathering together. The Lord of hosts is mustering an army for battle. They come from a distant land, from the end of the heavens. The Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole earth. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Therefore all hands will be feeble, and every human heart will melt, and they will be terrified. Pangs and agony will seize them. They will be in anguish like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at one another. Their faces will be aflame. See, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the earth a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light. I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pride of the arrogant, and lay low the insolence of tyrants.
Yeah, so God's going off a little bit.
By the way, this is the NRSV UE. It's the version we always use, but just letting you know that.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more kind of what we've been seeing. The Bible has a lot of this, of long drawn out threats. It's a long drawn out threat.
You know what though? So over New Year's, my girlfriend and I watched all the extended Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
And I don't know, I'm kind of more zoned into it.
What do you mean?
Because they all talk that way.
Oh, yeah, that kind of very regal.
Well, I had a dream. A shadow growing in the east. It's all this sort of wild imagery.
It's extended and poetic.
5% more attuned to understand it.
But it's a lot of threats. I mean, a lot of this shit can be you could condense these whole 12 verses down to "I will fuck them up." Literally,
that's true.
You could have 100 functionally equivalent.
What gets dark is... where's the verse?
I know the one you're late. I know the one you're thinking about, and I'll get to it.
It's verse 9. Is that the one you're thinking about?
No, that's actually different. There's actually a much darker verse that I'm thinking about.
I'm sure it is, and I can't remember all the verses off the top of my head.
I know why you're thinking about cruel, specifically using that word.
See, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the earth a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. This is the sort of verse that a pastor might use to explain God's actions in Revelation of cleansing the earth, restarting the earth. But there's no escaping the fact that they're the point here is to just wallop the shit out of Babylon.
Yeah, and I'm actually a little curious about this. So let me Google this real quick. So,
what Googlest thou?
So Babylon, so I'm actually curious, when did Babylon eventually fall? Because, for one thing, I was thinking about this as I was reading this. If your prophecy is the fall of a country, on a long enough time scale, that's almost guaranteed to be true, right?
Yes.
like if I go back to what's a country that doesn't exist anymore? I'm trying to think. Prussia. Prussia isn't a thing anymore, right? Like, it's an independent country.
Correct.
It got absorbed by
I think Germany.
Yeah, around there. Or let's even go back. The Ottoman Empire. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's use the Ottoman Empire because that's not a thing anymore. Like, if in the midst of the Ottoman Empire, I'm like, God has spoken to me. The clouds shall part, and fire shall rain down, and the Ottoman Empire shall crumble. Before the blue bird traces across the sky thrice, the pillars will fall. And it's like, yeah, eventually. Well, eventually.
Speaking of which, it's a verse coming up later on, but it speaks about in this place after its destruction will be just fucking desolate. No one's living there but coyotes, or they're not coyotes. That's I think North Central American thing. Jackals, whatever wild dog, and they mentioned owls too. Point is, it's barren land is now reclaimed by the wilds, and that no one ever will ever again live there. And I guarantee I could probably GPS pinpoint a dude's house on the spot,
Oh, I looked this up actually. It's actually you know about the remains of Babylon, because there's a verse in there no inhabitants will inhabit it or right. Like that. It's UNESCO heritage site. It's an archaeological dig. So I don't think anyone actually does live there. You can just move in though.
Isn't Babylon a big place? I mean,
well, the empire. We're talking about the empire versus the city, I guess. I don't know.
I'd have to assume he means the entire empire because. So many of the other prophecies mention several cities. The residents of Hasham, will weep, and the residents of Ajmer, and by the way, I made those cities up. Did you know that?
Did you believe him?
Did you believe me? But, whatever the city names are, there are plenty of those verses for all of these nations. So I have to assume there has to be some...
Okay.
It's got to be large scale.
So a couple things that I think are interesting. So I wanted to look up the time difference between when this was written and when Babylon actually fell.
Okay.
So I believe we're still in Proto-Isaiah, which I think is 1 through 33 or 1 through 30, something like that. 1 through 39 is technically considered to be Proto-Isaiah. So we're still in the OG Isaiah, which is generally agreed upon to live during the 8th century BCE. So that's when it was written, 8th century BCE. Babylon fell in 539 BCE. So we're looking at a few hundred years, basically, between prophecy and Babylon actually going down.
Right. Which, you mentioned that, and it recalls the fact that, the Israelites were in Egypt, in slavery in Egypt for 300 years?
Is that the story? I can't remember. I'm fairly certain that's generally regarded as ahistorical now.
I think it was 400. But even so, someone reading this in, say, first century Palestine, first century Israel, they're not going to question the historicity of those things, at least not to the degree that we do now, because they don't have carbon dating, they don't have the resources we have to investigate things. Granted, they are 2,000 years closer to the event than we are, but still, it all, I guess, just raises a question: why does God take so long to do things? And I think we mentioned before how there seems to be this pattern of, in early Genesis, God is directly doing things. God sends the flood, God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, which is mentioned in this passage, by the way, later on. And then it goes to God using things to, using other people to enact his will, sending David and his army, sending, I was going to say Mahershala Hashbaz, favorite biblical name, sending Nebuchadnezzar, to do things, or, talking about, various kings and such. And then it moves to almost, God not doing things and just sort of events happening, and
God. Well, a lot of we're seeing God using nations to do stuff. It's like Genesis, God in Genesis is like, I'm just gonna blow you up, and now it's like, oh, I need an army from someone. Like I would like manipulate world events, like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
which is interesting. It's also verse 11 is interesting because I'm going to connect it to a verse later. In the rest of the chapter, I will punish the world for its evil. Also, it's like weird switching between Babylon and world. It's like we're on Babylon, but then like here it's like the whole world. It's a little bit that's a little weird. For its evil and the wicked for their iniquity, I will put an end to the pride of the arrogant and lay low the insolence of tyrants. But he's saying that the insolence of tyrants, like I think referring to the king, but he's not just lightning striking the king of Babylon or whatever. He's like biznatching the entire continent, right, or whatever.
Yeah, this isn't a drone strike. This is a nuclear bomb.
Even drone strikes are gentle in comparison to this, even when they do take out like a caravan of school children or whatever.
I don't think we have it now. Did you ever see? It's a speculative video. It's not real, but it predicts what could be, and it's individual drones that have like a one-shot use.
Interesting.
And they would, like, with facial detection software, they if I can find the video, I'll link it, but like videos of drones just going into a classroom, IDing specific students, popping them in the head, in the forehead, like with a 9mm, and then just flying off. Or
so that's horrifying conceptually, but it's also one of those things where it's like that's horrifying conceptually, but I can also think of like humanitarian applications for that, in the sense of like there are like, okay, a great example, like I'll just go like remember, I think it was Boko Haram kidnapped all those girls years ago, and was just like all those schoolgirls, and we were just like, they're ours now. It's like we can't just drop a bomb on the place because we'll kill the schoolgirls, but with one of those you could just send like however many of those you need in and just like pop individually the terrorists. And it's like, oh, cool.
Was that the event where like there were mock, almost like presidential posters, like vote for?
I can't remember.
And it had the name of the.
It's been a long time since I've looked up the deets. But for one thing, this is a little topic, but I know this is like a real thing that exists, and we've used it at least once. Do you know what the knife drone?
The knife drone?
No, it's a real thing. You could like look it up right now. It's like no one's gonna see it on screen, but you can guys Google this. It's like this. I can't remember what it's called. It's like just like a knife blade drone thing. It's got that's the one. Top one. That right. One to the right. That one. One to the right. That one. It's just a rocket with swords on it, basically. It doesn't have an explosive. It doesn't explode. It's no blowy uppy.
You wish it would though.
Well, the reason it was designed to reduce collateral damage, because like basically it's like as long as we can be, I think it's, I don't know how many feet across it is, like 7 or 8 feet across or whatever. But like this way you don't like kill like collateral damage. It's nice, you know. You could just like ninja shish kebab. What's it called? There's a name for it. Like there's an actual
called the R9X with 6 blades, all positioned radially around the body.
Okay, it's called an R9X. Cool.
Rather than explosive source, familiar with the weapon said 2 explosions were. I'm reading stuff that's not related.
Hellfire. It's a modified Hellfire missile. And they use this to...
Oh my God, they used it?!
Oh, no, this has been used, yeah. Evidently we killed someone named Ayman al-Zawahiri. I don't know...
He's on the most wanted terrorist list, so... I suppose he had it coming.
Causing surprisingly little damage beyond the target. Yeah, see, that's nice. That's nice. I mean, I'm gonna say, if we're going to be, like, doing... Let me put it this way. If we're going to be doing, like... drone strikes, I'd rather it be less collateral damage than more collateral damage.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose on the large term scale, that's much more humane than, a general area explosion.
Could you imagine how... I've thought of this a little bit, like if you could take technology back to like this time that we're talking about, like if you could just bring like a decent rifle back with you, you could like change history forever, right?
Oh yeah.
Like just, I'm trying to think what you do. Like, who would be if you had to go back in time to like, I'm trying to think, if you had 10 minutes of activity anywhere in the past, where would you go to maximize benefit? I think I know what I would do.
Well, this is like a knee-jerk reaction. Defend the Library of Alexandria. But that's a knee-jerk reaction, and I'm sure historically there's actually probably a better, like, by wiping out some attacking force, there's probably somewhere better in history you can place that 10-minute span of time. What were you thinking?
Well, in order to maximize benefit, it's so hard because there's like a question between like technology versus like events, I guess, in my head, right? Because like on the one hand, you could make the case that like going back in time and just have 10 minutes, like listen, shut the fuck up. Diseases, most of them, not all of them, are caused by creatures so small you can't see them. Heat and alcohol kills them. Wash your hands, and like that's it. And I'm like I'm zooted back into time or whatever. Theoretically, as long as they listen to me, I have saved true billions of lives I've just saved. If like literally like the ancient Greeks get on board with germ theory and like boiling things and like washing hands before surgery, billions of lives saved.
What if this consequently prevents your birth somehow?
Well, true. But I was thinking about this the other day. I was like thinking about the whole go back in time to kill Hitler thing, right? And I hope you don't mind that we're off on a tangent. If you want to get back,
the point of this blog or podcast is to go off tangent.
But I was thinking about the whole go back in time and kill Hitler thing, and now that I like have a much more like anthropological, sociological analysis of things, like as an adult, I don't know that it would work because in my head I'm like, oh, you go back in time, kill Hitler as a teenager, whatever. But like, you can make the case that like the socio-political environment of that time was one in which like there's like a Hitler-shaped hole in history where like you kill Hitler and but like Hitler didn't like invent anti-Semitism or nationalism or anything like that. So like I wonder, I don't know, maybe there is something. It's like and people discuss different like historical things in history, like great man theory versus this versus that versus this. But like, and I hate the term great man because I think it's like often implied like. I think it's usually mean like significant people, and it's also sexist now that I'm thinking about it. What I really mean is significant person, I guess. But like maybe like even if I go back in time and kill Hitler, I wonder if you'd bump back in time and it was just like, oh, some other fuckwit filled the whole history.
Now Krieger is the
and it's like, oh, the
Gustav Krieger,
right? And the swastika was blue on red rather than black or some shit like that, and it's like fuck. So now you have to answer the question, like, all right, well, it's some weird thing. It's like, all right, well, how do I prevent anti-Semitism from happening? And then if you suddenly realize, like, well, a lot of that shit's rooted in, like, the Christ story and, like, the split of Christianity and Jews. So, like, a little part of it has, like, you have to kill Jesus before he turns up. The only way to prevent the Holocaust is to kill Jesus as a teenager.
But there's actually a specific type of, it's not a paradox, it's sort of irony. It comes up in a few sci-fi stories where someone will go back in time to prevent a thing, and they end up doing the thing.
Oh, well, no, but I can't. No. Yeah, you'd have to. I could work it out. I could do it. If Jesus dies alone in the field at like 13 and no one sees it happen, nothing will happen. It's fine.
Well, here's another thing. I forget the exact number. I was thinking about this earlier today. I want to say I heard this from a sermon long ago. During the time of Christ's ministry, is doing stuff in Israel and things, that 3-year span of time, I think it's 3 years, there were, I want to say like upwards of 24, 27 other people claiming to be the Messiah.
I've heard that. Yeah, that was like a thing. There was someone called, can you Google the circle drawer for me?
The circle drawer.
It's like Honey, the circle drawer or something. Just do circle drawer.
I hope if I could spell.
Circle
drawer.
Drawer. What the fuck is this fuck's name? No.
It's just a bunch of compasses.
Oh no! Yeah, that isn't a technical person. History. Honey, there it is. Honey Hatme Agel. Honi HaMe'agel, Honi the Circle Drawer, was a Jewish scholar of the 1st century BCE. During the age of Tanaim, the scholars from whose teachings the Mishnah was derived. During the 1st century BCE, a variety of religious movements and splintered groups developed around the Jews in Judea. A number of individuals claimed to be miracle workers. In the tradition of Elijah and Elisha, the ancient Jewish prophets, the Babylonian Talmud, and the Jewish Talmud both provide some examples as Jewish miracle workers, including Honi. And you want to read the circle drawing incident?
Sure. Circle drawing incident. His surname is derived from an incident in which, according to the Babylonian Talmud, his prayer for rain was miraculously answered on one occasion when God did not send rain well into the winter. That's weirdly worded. Paraphrase, in Israel, it rains mainly in the winter. Honi drew a circle in the dust, stood inside it, and informed God that he would not move until it rained. When it began to drizzle, Honi told God that he was not satisfied and expected more rain. The balls!
I know, right?
That's some real Gideon shit there. It then began to pour. He explained that he wanted a calm rain. At which point the rain calmed to a normal rain.
He was almost put into harem, excommunication. I don't know if there's a guttural on that H there. I'm just guessing that it's harem, but maybe it's just harem. Excommunication for the above incident in which he showed dishonor to God as if he imposed himself upon God. However, Shimon ben Shattak, the brother of Queen... Can you get that a shot? Because I can't actually
Queen Shlomtzion.
I think... Hold on.
Shlomtzion.
Wow, you don't see an OMT too often, do you? Schlumpzion. Wow. Love that. Excused him, saying that Honi had a special relationship with God. The two variations of the story are in the Talmud in Ta'anit 19a and 23a. It goes on, but it's this kind of shit you were talking about, right?
Special relationship with God.
Him and God are buds. Isn't that? This is a fun story. I love this story.
It's like Joseph Smith. It's like, trust me, guys. I have a special relationship with God.
But you know what's weird is that you lose that into Christianity, right? I feel like in Judaism, you get types like Honi and or Abraham, far be it from you, God, and you get Moses's, and you get people like intercessors. You get people who want to stand up to God a little bit in Judaism, and once Christianity hits, you get this all sovereignty, never question business. It kind of ruined it. It kind of sucks a little bit. I think that was a shitty turn.
I will say there's a missing place in contemporary Christian culture for the angry prayer, where you just rail against God. For perceived injustices.
Although you do also get I don't know. It's this dialogue because you also get the Job bit where Job is this and God's like, "Where were you at the beginning of the world? Huh? Can you hook the Leviathan with a fish hook and all that jazz?" But it's like a dialogue, I guess. I don't know. Real quick, I will say, I'm not super well read on contemporary Jewish theology, but what little of it I know, I think there actually is a vibe of the Jews love the Jewish people are it's there's a vibe of we're friends with God, but we also feel slighted by him a little bit. I don't know. It's a weird thing of an anger, or a back and forth anger with God type of thing.
I mean, on one hand, they're the chosen people. On the other hand, Egypt and the Holocaust.
Oh, more than that. Do you know all the Jews were kicked out of England one time? Literally, I think it was in the 1200s. They were all of... can you Google... I'm sorry, this is a Google heavy stream. But, English removal of Jews, I think.
English removal of Jews. Swear to God, this better not pop up something contemporary.
No, Edict of Expulsion was a royal decree issued by King Edward I of England on 18 July 1290, expelling all Jews from the Kingdom of England. Jesus. I can't think. Expelling all Jews from the Kingdom of England. Edward advised the sheriffs of all counties he wanted all Jews expelled by no later than All Saints' Day, 1st of November that year. Yeah. Literally just all of them. So, like, and I'm sure, like, we can go on. We can talk about Russian pogroms. We can talk about, I mean, fuck, you know, the history of
that shit on a lot historically.
It's crazy. It makes no sense. Like a basically inoffensive group of people. Just the wild. But like, I've heard that like anti-Semitism. I've heard two versions of this. Well, they're like not two versions of the same thing, but they're like related. I've heard that anti-Semitism is the original conspiracy theory, which I can see to some degree. I can see to some degree. I can kind of see where that's coming from. Certainly in like at least in like the West and like in Christian, like it was a new thing. The idea of a like seditious group of people operating secretly in the world to do evil shit. It kind of is the first one. Like that kind of.
I've heard a lot of.
That was kind of in like medieval Europe and all that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories that you wouldn't think have anything to do with Judaism actually have a secret history in anti-Semitism.
Oh, for sure. A lot of that shit that's traced back, and I've to some degree, you know, there's lots more we can talk about this. In some degree, I've always wondered if like Satan can be considered a conspiracy theory. There's an evil entity behind all the bad things in the world. Is like kind of like it's a proto conspiracy theory, I guess maybe. Like the idea of like, oh yeah, there's this evil person and who's evil and they are very powerful and mysterious, and they wreak all the bad stuff in the world. It's kind of a proto-conspiracy theory. Because, real quick, last thing I'll say, I know I've talked too much, I'm so sorry, just the last thing, because I think in some sense the essence of a good conspiracy theory, and when I say good, I mean like one that like gets in people's brains and is like effective for trapping them, is the idea that all the ills are connected. It's like all drains back to like a singular entity, you know?
Yeah, people want to think that they really know what's going on, because the world is large and intimidating and big, and you know, even just America. If you ignore the rest of the world, America is so large that like, you know, half of us don't even know how our government works because the government's so big that none of us. Like, hardly any one person can understand it all.
Half is generous.
Half is generous. You know, some of us don't even, like, some of us think that, like, I don't know, what's a stupid thing some Americans believe?
Yeah, time.
There's an East Dakota.
Or like the Earth is flat is a thing that like a surprisingly large number of Americans believe.
Africa is a country. You know, like.
Well, I don't know the people. That was just a stupid thing. I mean, they're both.
It's a stupid thing Americans, but well, I suppose it's not a thing about America. You know, people think like July 4th was, I don't know, George Washington's birthday.
Sure. But people do this about all kinds of shit, right? And like, don't get me wrong. Complexity. Sometimes one thing does have a variety of outcomes. Like it happens. Like sure. Like if you sometimes it happens that people are secretly allergic to something for a long time and it's been causing all kinds of fucked up symptoms.
Well, that's does.
Right. It happens. But there's also that like you can't. A lot of times it doesn't happen. Like people do this like nutrition. Be like, oh, it's gluten, and it's like. Nah, it's probably like a bunch of shit. Like it may be, or maybe it is gluten. I don't know. Maybe you do have celiac disease, but it could also be a bunch of other shit combined together. But like it happens like all that. Like I saw this with a lot of like people with like the Ukraine bullshit. I've seen like a weirdly number. There's like a. So I agree with this. Like, there's a thing that you had to go through as like a lefty or progressive in America, where you like grow up and you're like, oh, America does bad shit. Like you're a kid, you're told America's perfect, and you grow up and it's like, oh, America's done kind of bad shit.
Oh yeah, MK Ultra and shit overseas,
Pinochet and CIA coups and like all kinds of crazy bullshit. But you could go too far with that and be like, because I saw some lefties do this, or some people who call themselves lefties at least, of like, oh, America is the source of all evil on the planet, all the time, forever. Like any bad thing that happened, that's America. And it's like, well, that's also stupid, right? Yes. It's its own kind of conspiracy theory, right? Like, and like America's powerful and big and it's responsible for a lot, but like not everything comes down to us, you know?
Well, it's because it's so tempting to, one, in general, just simplify issues. I mean, think of something that's not even political, diagnosing a disease. You know, relevant example or recent example, COVID. There are over 200 known symptoms related to COVID-19. 200! You know, weird stuff, like growing hair, weird places, the obvious things like headache, cough, and stuff, but like, you know, certain organs being affected, certain tissues starting to get like 200, over 200 symptoms. There's no simple way to explain how COVID-19 can affect you. Now, there's a distribution chart of most common symptoms. You know, cough is probably the single most common. Some people had COVID-19 didn't develop cough, and then there's the weird one: people lose taste and smell. Some people didn't. When I got COVID, I retained my sense of taste, slightly lost my smell. But some friends, they lost their sense of smell for a year. Mm-hmm. One of my friends lost 100 pounds because he couldn't taste or smell anything, and the appeal of food, like the appeal it formerly had, was no longer there. But that's just COVID-19. Then you think of things like certain cancers or certain genetic conditions that manifest, and the body's a trillion different factors and things happening all at the same time.
And then you factor in things that have like overlapping symptoms, where it could be any number of things. And then it's like, it's also influenced by like age and ethnicity and sex and a billion other fucking environmental fucking exposure and shit like that. It's fucking impossible.
It's actually what is it they teach in medical school? If you see it,
horses, not zebras.
Yes. People assume it's a horse, not a zebra. And doctors have to learn to think, it could be the zebra.
Well, I think it's like a two-part system where it's when you hear. I think the official line is if you hear hoofbeats, you think horses, not zebras. Which is, I think, what it is given two potential diseases, pick the more likely one. Like if you don't know what it is and you have to treat one. Treat horses, not zebras, because it's usually horses.
Oh, yeah.
But then you also do have to have the other thing. It's like, but sometimes it might be zebras. And it's like, you have to keep that in the back of your mind. Like, it can happen. And, notably, depends where you are. Depending where you are in the world, maybe zebras are more common than horses.
Did you just say zebra?
Yeah, I snuck in the English zeb.
Rhymes with Deborah. Zebra.
I think that's how they pronounce it, I believe. I'm fairly certain.
Who's they?
English folk.
Why do the English get to say how to pronounce the word zebra?
Well, you know how because they have Z rather than Z.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's zebra if you're have received pronunciation.
What's the natural habitat of a zebra?
Like, where does it live?
Southern Africa. Extinct. Now extinct in Burundi and Lesotho. Not entirely. Sorry. Let me scare you guys there. I know you're really concerned about the.
I have no idea how it's been. Maybe zebras would be closer to the original pronunciation. I have no fucking clue.
Anywho.
Yeah, let's bring it back around. So I'll pick up on verse 12, right?
Yes.
Okay. Get back to my thing. Okay. So talking about what God's going to do to Babylon. I will make mortals more rare than fine gold, and humans than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place at the wrath of the Lord of hosts, in the day of his fierce anger. Like a gazelle, excuse me, like a gazelle on the run, or like sheep with no one to gather them, all will turn back to their own people, and all will flee to their own lands. Whoever is found will be thrust through, and whoever is caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered, and their wives raped. See, I am stirring up the Medes against them, who have no regard for silver, and do not delight in gold. Their bows will slaughter the young men. They will have no mercy on the fruit of their womb, and in their eyes will not pity children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pride of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. Arabs will not pitch their tents there. Shepherds will not make their flocks lie down there. But wild animals will lie down there, and its houses will be full of howling creatures. There ostriches will live, and there goat demons will dance. Hyenas will cry in its towers, and jackals in the pleasant places. Its time is close at hand, and its days will not be prolonged. Are you blue lettering the word for goat demon?
I just wanted a visual for goat. There's so many.
Yeah, it's classic. Can you actually blue letter that word for me? Because I am genuinely curious what word is goat demon there. I think you could, yeah. Yeah, lot. I gotta admit, lot to unpack there. That's a lot. Let's check up on old Goaty McDemon face first and see where we're at. Because I don't want to load us down with too much.
Isaiah 13.
Okay, so we're looking at verse. It's pretty down there. It's verse 21. Okay, so the NIV just has it as wild goats.
Something.
Alright, so it's Sa'ir.
KJV translates Strong's H8163, don't know what that number means. In the following manner: kid, goat, devil, satyr, hairy, rough.
Outline of biblical usage: adjective, hairy, masculine noun, he-goat, buck. As a sacrificial animal, satyr may refer to a demon-possessed goat like the swine of Gadara.
From Matthew, okay.
How does this okay, so this is a couple things in Hebrew does this. There's another word, I think it's Lilith, which sometimes is translated screech owl and sometimes is like nightmare shadow she-devil demon thing. How does this happen? They're not the same. Like, imagine if I had a word where like, oh, this word could mean tuna sandwich, but it could also mean plutonium bomb. How could this happen? What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, look at the word. Well, speaking of the word sandwich is the thing you eat, food sandwich between two slices of bread, but it also means to sandwich, to be between, to compress.
There's at least a conceptual link there, though, right? What's the conceptual link? Okay, is it, I guess, why would they use the same word for just goat generally and demon-possessed? I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like, I understand the connection. Like, oh, it's a goat and a demon-possessed goat. But those are so, like, if I had a word that could mean regular deer, but could also, like, okay, if I had a word that, like, could mean human man, but could also mean serial killer man, and, like, that's not a useful word. Like, if I was like, oh, yeah, the Dindu's coming over tomorrow, and Dindu can mean normal person or serial killer, not useful. I would like, hey, any just bear which version of Dindu are you using there? It's like, come on, right? Is it me?
It's you. It's the complexity of language.
I guess it's so weird.
What was the joke I heard recently? It's like some guy was saying he hates verbs. He's a comedian, saw this bit, but it's like he hates verbs. It's like I dance, they dance, 1,000 people dance. But he dances? Is he dancing more? No one dances more than me. It's like, or like the word fawn. Fawn's it's a female deer. I think is it baby?
No, I think it's just baby. Doe is. I don't think fawn is gendered or sexed at all.
Fawn is baby deer, but it also means to to act sort of like lovingly and obsequiously. Am I thinking of the word? To fawn over something.
Oh, I thought you were saying like Mr. Tumnus fawn.
He's a fawn.
Yeah, he's also called a fawn.
But it's a different spelling.
Different spelling, though. I thought you were going that direction.
Or like tackle, to attack someone, but then there's a tackle box. What? It's not in a box for attacking people.
Yeah, I wonder how that did happen.
But there's tackle, attack.
Yeah. Now, making a connection here. So, you've got that verse 11. I will lay low the insolence of tyrants. And then you jump down to verse 16, their infants will be dashed to pieces. And it's like, wait. I thought we were killing, like, evil kings and shit. Why are we stabbing infants and having wives be raped? And, like, their eyes will not pity children. Like, this does not seem like the same vibe of, like, let the little children come unto me, for as such is the kingdom of heaven. Or
very, very un-Christ-like attitude right here.
Let's be honest. This is a villain speech. In any movie, if you have the guy frothing at the mouth, I will burn their strongholds and defile their women and salt the land, like, that's the bad guy. That is 100% of the time the villain, right? But what's interesting, and here I think what's going on here is, I think, there's still, I mean, this is still, very patriarchal. Women and children are like the property of the man, of like the husband or whatever, right? And so in some sense, I think that this is almost framed as a punishment for the ruler. Like, in some sense, it's
like how line prides work, where if one male line defeats the other, the victor line will eat the other line's children.
I did not know that.
And the lionesses will let him, because you don't
want to
pass on
that.
Inferior genes.
Like, I think it's almost like God saying, like, the king has offended me so much that I'm going to punish him by raping his wives and murdering his children. And that's like a punishment for him, but it's like a punishment for the king in the same way of, like, I'll burn your goats is. It's like, it's literally, I will destroy your property, I think, is to some degree.
There's a sense, too, in which we don't nearly to the degree that I suppose people in this context would, the sense of, like, familial connection. What's the best example I can come up with? Lord of the Rings, Bilbo says of Frodo, he's not some hard-headed, what's the line?
I can't remember, the fool of a took and all that jazz. I can't remember the exact line. You're talking about, like, the close cousins or whatever?
Yeah, like, he's a Baggins, not some...
Sackville Bagginses. Sackville Bagginses, thank you.
Actually, speaking of fool of a took, it's in the Hobbit, it's the took side of Bilbo that is the adventurous part. It's a running motif. Goes to story. Wrote a paper on it. It's used an example in class. It's a good paper. Very proud.
Do you want to move on to the next chapter?
Let's do it.
Let's see. So we're on.
Somehow it gets even darker.
This
is a longer one.
How many verses in 14?
We got 32.
32.
That's 10 more.
So that's 16 and 16, right?
Yes.
All right.
You want to take the first half this time?
I'll take the first half. All right. Restoration of Judah. So this is talking about, like, long term, where basically...
Yeah, so brief refrain from just shit-talking Babylon.
Yeah, I think this is implied that at some point Judah's going to get, like, biznatched, which they did. Historically, the Babylonians did conquer Judah and take them away into exile, but then later on, after the Persians conquer Babylon, the king Cyrus of Persia basically let some of the exiled Jews go back to Israel. Although I think historically, I can't remember how the story in the Bible relates it, but I believe historically, like, definitely, they didn't, like, cart off the entire population. So I think later on there was some indication that, like, when, like, the Jews came back from Babylon, there was tension between the groups, which I think is actually recorded in, like, Hezekiah and Jeremiah, maybe? I think there's some shit in there about, like, the tension between, like, the groups of, like, the people who had stayed behind versus the people returning from exile. But
there is.
We'll get to that when we get to that. But the Lord will have compassion on Jacob, and will again choose Israel, and will settle them in their own land, and aliens will join them and attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the nations will take them, and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess the nations, as male and female slaves in the Lord's land. Cool. They will take captive those who were their captors, and rule over those who oppress them. Jesus. When the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, how his insolence has ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers that struck down the peoples in wrath. with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses exult over you. The cedars of Lebanon saying, since you were laid low, so no one comes to cut us down. Shale beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades to greet you, all who were leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. All of them will speak and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, and the sound of your harps. Maggots are the bed beneath you, and worms are your covering. All right. How are you fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of dawn? How you are cut down to the ground, who laid the nations low. You said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly on the heights of Zaphon. I will ascend to the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the depths of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms? Well, any thoughts, Theo?
Yes, so... one, find it odd that there's just a brief 2-verse, section to say, it's like, we're going to shit-talk Babylon, and like, don't worry, Judah, we'll restore you. Let's go back to shit-talking Babylon.
Well, I don't think at this point, when this is being written, Babylon has conquered Israel yet, but I wonder if it's like obvious to the author that that's going to happen. I wonder if the author can like see the writing on the wall, which actually happens in another. Come to think about it, it's a different Bible story.
That's where we get
but I wonder if the author can be like knows he's like, listen, we stand no chance. Babylon, we're for sure getting conquered. So I wonder if this is kind of like a to keep your spirits up in exile and destruction kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's what's going on.
It very well could be. I mean, like we mentioned in other episodes of ours, that my view of Scripture is that it's an ever-evolving revelation about how people see God. Where a lot of God's attributes seem to shift as chronological time goes on. We mentioned, at first God does the punishing directly, and then God sends people to do the punishing, and yada yada. But, more than that, there's this really subtle change in how people interact with God or how they expect God to be. And this, saying that, like, well, Babylon's going to capture us, but eventually Babylon will get theirs. I admit it, I kind of see that as, like, humans looking at the overall progression of history, like kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall, stuff happens, and the lines on maps get redrawn and such. And this is just that, but with like a theological, twist put on it. We're like, eventually God's gonna get you, and every empire is gonna have their last day. But I think this is Isaiah sort of just mapping that pattern, not consciously. I don't think Isaiah is saying like, oh, how can I make this look like God's doing it? Yeah, this is, but if there's a pattern here, I think Isaiah is seeing it through the lens of, he's just seeing history through the lens of God's actions.
Could you blue letter something for me?
Come on.
Verse 12. Oh, you're in Isaiah 13 there.
I need to go to Isaiah 14. This what gets me to... There we go.
And then 12. I want to see particularly a morning star, son of dawn.
Oh, yes, it was the next thing I was going to talk on.
A star of the morning right there. What word is it?
Hold on, I think it just went back to the verse.
Click on, that's what you're going to click right there.
Lucifer.
Hello. I think this is where, so if I remember correctly, this word, which is in Greek, can you go up see how it's pronounced? Halel, or Halel. Halel.
Strong's H, 1966. Haleo.
Okay. I believe, if I remember correctly, in Latin, this was translated using the word Lucifer. And then later on, at some point, they were like conceptually connected this to the idea of Satan. I believe is the order of events there. Yeah. So this term, Lucifer, originally referred to the king of Babylon. And the idea, remember, it says you have, you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven, I will raise my throne above the stars of God. But this is like a haughty king on earth, connected conceptually with maybe like the Tower of Babylon, the Tower of Babel, There could be a connection there, which I think Babel and Babylon are etymologically connected, I think.
Ooh, I'm going to have to...
You're going to have to fact check me on that?
Yeah.
I think the Tower of Babel is etymologically connected to Babylon.
Babel related to Babylon. Original name Babel, also Hebrew name for Babylon, is uncertain.
Okay, so the original derivation of the name Babel, also the Hebrew name for Babylon, is uncertain. The native Akkadian name of the city was Bab Elim, meaning Gate of God. So yeah, I think Babel and Babylon are...
I know things pertinent to this.
Oh, well, share them!
Okay, so this is, I mentioned before, this is coming from the Almost Heretical podcast. But, so the idea behind the Tower of Babel wasn't necessarily that people were trying to outdo God, but the concept was that gods live on the tops of mountains. And they were trying to create a literal mountain to provide a place for God to dwell there. In other words, it's like you buy your cat a cat bed. You're like, well, now the cat will rest here in the cat bed. But God, very cat-like, was like, nah, fuck that.
God does explicitly sort of do that later on in Hebrew theology, where it's with the whole resting place, Ark of the Covenant, etc., etc.
Right, but that's God initiated.
Okay, so is that the shtick? Is that the suggestion that like? No, I didn't ask for that dwelling place.
Well, it's the presumptuousness that humans can, just by creating this thing, in a way, command God. You can say, like, you are our God, instead of God saying, you're my people. It's, that's the sort of idea that's going on here. Now, if you connect that to Babylon...
I think I'm fair in saying that Babel and Babylon are etymologically connected, if not, like, referencing the same thing.
Well, I mean, it says so here.
Yeah, I think it's literally the same thing.
The name Babel, also the Hebrew name for Babylon.
So, yeah, so this is this whole thing getting connected together here. So, the Christian scripture, and to some degree Jewish theology does this too, where they, like, have, like, overlapping... like metaphors or images where it's like, oh, this is literally referring to the king of Babylon, but spiritually in a greater parable, story, metaphysics, archetype sense is also meaning Satan. They do that a lot, you know?
Yeah, so, well, here Satan is... They're both compared to the morning star or the son of dawn. And why that is because I don't know if 2,000 years of cosmic motion has changed this, but it used to be that the first star to appear in the morning would be Venus. So they call that the morning star. I'm not sure the association between like Venus and that star and the king of Babylon, but that's why. That's where that name comes from.
Yeah, and conceptually, like, they're definitely, like, motif-wise drawing a connection. At least, to be fair, I don't know, I have no idea how developed the theology of Satan was when Isaiah was written, because I know that a lot of shit happened with that throughout, like, Jewish and Christian theology. Like, Satan has gone through some, like, revisions over time, for sure.
I'd assume there's some, because not the oldest recorded, or not the oldest, what am I trying to say?
Written?
The first book we did, Amos, those are the oldest
composed
sources. Yeah, those are the oldest sources we have, but the oldest story in Scripture is Job. And Job, of course, starts off with conversation between God and Satan. Or God and the how he's referred to in Job.
He's not referred to as
accuser.
Is he not referred accuser? But the word is shaitan, I think, which can mean accuser, but can also just mean enemy. I think. He's like a prosecutor, basically. He's like heaven's DA. Yeah, kinda a little bit.
I will say that as far as the grand mythos of humanity goes, the idea that Satan is like a legal prosecutor is an interesting theme.
Oh, yeah, it's a chewy topic. Like you could get a lot of mileage out of that idea.
Like his devilishness is in the fact that he accuses you of evil.
And it's an interesting thing. I also think that you could draw an idea of like Satan's like issue is he's like and I think this shows up in some sources. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion like of the idea of Satan, like the metaphysics of it and everything. But like at least in some sources, there seems to be some hinting that like Satan as like the nitpicking rule guy who can't like no sin has to be punished, like obviously like that's can't be on the other way. What's interesting actually is I think there's different versions. I think in some Muslim sources, I'm trying to remember. I'm gonna half remember this. I believe in some Muslim sources, or maybe this is some Talmudic sources. I think it's Muslim sources. Satan rebels because God asks him to bow down to Adam, and Satan's like, no. I think that's a Muslim thing.
There is, again, this is from the Almost Vertical podcast, I'm getting this, but there's an idea that when God put humans in charge of the garden, that God is elevating humans to the status, like, to a position that normally would have gone to angelic beings.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely in some sources, I think Muslim or maybe some Jewish, that like Satan hates that idea, that Satan's like not down for that, basically, which is interesting. But at any rate, originally, just so y'all know, the term Lucifer originally didn't refer to Satan. It was a Latin translation of the Hebrew word Hillel, which meant morning star, which references the king of Babylon. That's where that comes from. The idea of that's like being applied to Satan, that comes later. That's a later interpretation.
In fact, there's also theories that the various mentions of Satan, Lucifer, the devil are actually all referring to different.
It's different beings.
Different beings entirely.
Yeah, who fucking knows? Yeah, you would take over with 17.
I do. Verse 17. Well, to continue verse 16, those who see will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world, 17 now, who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities, who would not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb, but you are cast out, away from your grave, like loathsome carrion, clothed with the dead, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a corpse trampled underfoot. You will not be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land, you have killed your people. May the descendants of evildoers never more be named. Prepare a place of slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their father. Let them never rise to possess the earth or cover the face of the world with cities. Verse 22, I will rise up against them, says the Lord of hosts, and will cut off from Babylon name and remnant, offspring and posterity, says the Lord. And I will make it a possession of the screech owl in pools of water, and I will sweep it with the broom of destruction.
I'm sorry, it just sounds like a really dorky D&D like magic item that's like, I give you the broom of destruction.
I will vacuum them with the Dyson of destruction. Verse 24, the Lord of hosts has sworn, as I have designed, so shall it be, and as I have planned, so shall it come to pass. I will break the Assyrian, submission of Assyria, in my land, and on my mountains trample him underfoot. His yoke shall be removed from them, and his burden from their shoulders. This is the plan that is planned concerning the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out over all the nations. For the Lord of hosts has planned, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back? An oracle concerning Philistia. In the year that King Ahaz died, this oracle came. Do not rejoice, all you Philistines, that the rod that struck you is broken. For from the root of the snake will come forth an adder, and its fruit will be a flying, fiery serpent. In my pastures the poor will graze, and the needy lie down in safety. But I will make your root die of famine, and your remnant I will kill. Wail, O gate, cry, O city, melt in fear, O Philistia, all of you. For smoke comes out of the north, and there is no straggler in its ranks. What will one answer the messengers of the nation? The Lord has founded Zion, and the needy among his people will find refuge in her.
Jeez. A lot to unpack there.
A lot. So we stopped the shit talking against Babylon, and then we quickly move on to go to Assyria, and Syria's gonna get the shit kicked out of it. Then Philistia's gonna get shit kicked out of it.
Just like a guy at a bar, drunk off his ass, pointing at a crowd of like 57 people, be like, and I'm gonna break your knees, and I'm gonna slash your throat, I'm gonna shit in your mouth, I'm gonna fuck your wife, just pointing, just belligerently staring at everyone.
That reminds me, I think it was a holiday family reunion. I don't even know. I don't know who this dude is. Like, I don't know my relationship to this dude. For all, like, some distant cousin, it might be married into the family, I don't know. But I remember he was drunk, and he was talking to some dude in the living room of the house around. He's like, I can beat you up.
No kidding.
And then he pointed to me, and I'm like 8 or 12 or whatever the fuck. He's like, beat him up and beat you up. And I'm like, what the fuck?
What is the matter with you?
Drunk people and their willingness to fight.
I guess. So, I am curious. I thought there was a verse in the Bible that said, hold on.
Said, hold on.
Okay, yeah. Can you... Okay, yeah, this is what I was looking for. So there's this verse that we have here. I just want to compare and contrast a little bit. Verse 21. Prepare a place of slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their father. Deuteronomy 24:16 explicitly says, quote, fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin. Is that not like a direct moral contradiction there?
Yes.
That's like a straightforward moral contradiction, right?
Yes, those dashing children's brains out on rocks and shit. There's songs about that. When Vatican II happened and people went from singing Latin to English, there were people horrified to realize what it was they were singing. Some of the songs are like, David wrote down, I will bash the infant's head against the rocks.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. More of that shit of like, I will punish the man by like killing his sons, like that property kind of bullshit. Could you blue letter something for me?
I can.
Verse 23.
Verse 23.
Thank you. Screech Owl.
Hedgehog.
Hedgehog? Wait.
23. 14, 23.
Possession of the hedgehog. What is this? Kipode. So here it's Porcupine, a hedgehog, or a screeching animal.
This is the NIV, by the way.
But it could also be a species of bird, perhaps the bittern. So it's either a hedgehog or a screech owl.
It's like that lizard called the horned toad. The horned toad lizard.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
It's in Oh Brother Where. Yeah.
I was just curious. And then you're right, like switching gears from Assyria to the Philistines again. It's wild how frequently the Philistines and the Israelites are beefing in the Bible. It's like constant.
I don't know, I feel like so much of Old Testament scripture comes down to God declaring one group safe, redeemed, restored, whatever, another group punished. Like, I will lift up this group. They may walk in pastures green and drink freely from the... And then God, and then in the next breath, God's like, I will smite these people so fucking hard they explode 800 times each. And it's like bipolar.
Now, one thing we didn't mention, Ahaz, so it mentions that when Ahaz died, that's when the oracle came. So Ahaz is succeeded by his son Hezekiah, who is like this chosen child that's been foretold.
Mm-hmm.
So this is we're kind of moving into the age of Hezekiah now, with Ahaz passing away, and that's where this oracle comes from. How long did Hezekiah reign before they were conquered? I'm curious, because Hezekiah takes over for Ahaz, and then he witnesses the destruction of the kingdom of Israel in 722 BCE. King of Judah during the siege of Jerusalem by Sennacherib in 701 BCE. And I just want to see... Yeah, so Hezekiah is going to purify the temple and do a bunch of other shiz. And then where does he go down? He was ill, the boil. Oh, right, we'll get to that. I forgot about that story.
What story?
Israel and his boil, or Hezekiah and his boil. We'll come to it later.
One specific boil?
Well, it might have been a plague of boils. Or a big boil. I don't know. According to Isaiah, Hezekiah lived another 15 years for praying to God. His son Caesar Manasseh was born at this time, 12 years of age, when he succeeded Hezekiah. Okay, so I don't think Babylon conquered Hezekiah during Hezekiah's life. I think that came after that, but I don't know. I'll get to that. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this chapter myself. Do you have any other thoughts?
Well, I don't know. When I read stuff like this, I think back to times when I would have been in high school or early college. How would I understand passages like let me find the verse. It might be the previous chapter, but I think it is previous chapter. But kind of applies here. God says, "This is my plan for the whole earth," and I take that to understand God's trying. Will punish the wicked, will uphold the innocent. Punish the wicked, uphold the innocent. But with I suppose, a hypercritical contemporary mind that we often examine everything with, how do you justify the cruelty of punishment so cruel that you yourself could be ascribed to commit the evils that you're punishing?
Absolutely.
It's like a feud. You killed old Uncle Remus, now we're going to kill you, and then you have 150 years of these families just back and forth killing each other.
We have to remember, we have this idea now of God of the Bible and Yahweh as being this universal God, but very much the original idea of the exact. Again, I've been trying for a long time now to get a handle on how, if I understand Elohim and Yahweh were different gods who got melded later on. The history of early Jewish belief is still unclear to me, and I've been trying to lock that down.
Brief mention of that in one of the Rick and Morty episodes.
Was there?
It's the Story Lord episode.
I have to check.
Because Jesus shows up at the end. Spoilers. How they save themselves is that Rick tries to get Morty to convert to Christianity, and the appeal of the story goes straight to zero because no one wants to hear it.
Right, I forgot he saves them by ruining the narrative interest of the story.
By turning it all into one come to Jesus sort of pitch. And
but at any rate, Yahweh is very much a national god. It's our God versus you. They do this in the Bible a lot. It's I have our God Yahweh, and you have your God Dagon or Baal or whoever the fuck. And it's it's battling gods. It's it's us versus your God. It's our God versus your God kind of shit.
Right. There's absolutely an evolution to that too. Again, almost vertical podcast guys, which has informed a lot of my current theology. But At first God was just one among other gods, but he was like the chief god. Mm-hmm. And his idea with Israel was, it's like if the president were going to be your mayor.
Yeah, it's like the Odin and Zeus situation, where you got like a main god and all the other gods.
Yeah. And then the other gods, eventually, they aren't other gods. They're angelic beings under God, or they're just outright like no longer believed in.
Or they're demons, which I think Paul says later, like they're not really gods, they're demons. That also comes up.
And in my crackpot theory of all time in history, I would explain this as humanity is ever so slowly trying to piece together a theology of goodness, and part of that is understanding how universal goodness is embodied in localized ways. Now here we're in a very incomplete phase where God is punishing evil, but he's doing so in an evil way. Except it's not considered evil because it's considered punishment. Now, later on, you get to Jesus, and it's mercy, not sacrifice, and a bruised reed he will not break, and that's when you start to realize, like, oh, maybe punishing evil isn't as good as resolving evil or correcting evil. Even then, though, there's still I still think that's incomplete theology, because there's certainly references to hell and eternal punishment, which just
well, it's an interesting question of like the sphere of caring, like from this perspective, this book we're reading right now, this document, I get the sense that like the people, the audience and author of this book, this document, they care about themselves and like their community and their nation and well-being, but like their sphere of caring does not extend beyond Israel, really. Like they don't really give a shit about what's going on in Babylon and like what happens to the people there, which I think was very common at the time. I think there was a really common, like, I think the idea of like universal human compassion and like we are one people, planet, citizen of Earth type shit. That's a new idea, right? That's pretty new.
Like it's so new that like it's referred to as globalism by like conservatives, and they just hate globalism because that's, you say globalism and they think like evil lizard pedophiles controlling the world.
And it gets complicated, right? Because there's like there's like legitimate criticisms to make of like the IMF and the World Bank, and like legitimate criticisms to make about the ways that like multinational corporations leverage international connection.
Once you say corporation,
well, yeah, but there are like things that are sometimes called globalism that I think you could like genuinely have issues with. But usually that's not what they're talking about. Usually they're talking about usually when they're talking about globalism, it's a dog whistle for basically like international cooperation and like the UN and shit. It's like they complain about globalism because what they want is to like it's the opposite. Well, what's the opposite of globalism? It's nationalism, right? It's
America first.
Right, it's that shit. It's, I remember actually being a kid, and you never, I don't know if you ever had this sense. Do you ever have a sense that like there were just certain things about you that wouldn't let you be a conservative? Like, I don't think I was ever going to end up a conservative, because like there were certain things, like I remember being in school, like 8th grade, and like reading something in the news or some school thing, I can't remember what it was, but it was saying like jobs are being, like audio manufacturing jobs were being sent from America to Japan, and people were really mad about it. But I can remember thinking, like, well, probably they need jobs too, right? And like that mentality of like, it's like not better or worse. It's like the job's just moved, but everybody needs that job, It's that sphere of like, you got to give a shit about them and us and everybody. Like it's an all part of this, the system.
Well, I think, and perhaps this is true of any given ideology, but growing up, there seemed to be emphasized certain things were emphasized to a certain extreme. So, what's an easy one? Love thy neighbor. if you take love thy neighbor to be an absolute, then there's a lot of other parts of at least traditional Christianity that stop making sense. So, for instance, historically, hundreds of years ago, black people used to be viewed as subhuman. Well, if God says love thy neighbor, and if you can argue this black person's my neighbor, then you can't rationalize considering them subhuman as well. If they're made in the image of God and you are as well, you can't. Are they made in a lesser image?
I mean, I believe extraordinary amounts of ink have been spilled in and around, like, the Confederate Civil War and before that in Europe and places where it was Confederate Civil War, the American Civil War involved with the Confederacy. Like, a lot of bullshit race science and a lot of bullshit theology. I mean, like, Mark of Cain shit. Some people said, like, being black was the Mark of Cain.
Oh, yeah,
that shit. The Mormons have their own fucking take on it. I mean, fucking skull shape phrenology bullshit. I mean, they did all that shit, right?
Oh, yeah.
There were certainly attempts made, and like I think that was the line, right? That was the line in like the American South was like, oh, we are compassionate for enslaving them because that's their natural. This is what's good for them. That's what's good and natural for them. And so I think really the issue is,
I suppose, but if you
can I say I've said this before that in a certain sense, all virtues can be summed up in two, which is reason and compassion. It's not enough. Like, it's not enough to like. It's not enough to just like want what's best for people. You have to be smart enough to know that. And like, and so it's an interesting question. Was there really anybody who was fooled by this? Was there really any person, white slave owner in the South, who actually like polygraph test them and they're like, no, I am doing what is best for my slave.
Statistically, that has to be the case. There has to be some.
But we're talking like, I have no idea how common or not. Like, I kind of lean in the direction of thinking they were mostly just assholes who knew they were being assholes and like wanted to like cover for themselves. But it's interesting. My point being is, at the end of the day, by itself, it's not enough to just say, let's love other people. You have to be smart enough and reasonable enough to know how to do that and what they're like.
Right.
Like, it's in like the position that black people are like less than is in a rational position.
Right. Now, I will say one crackpot theory of the universe is that those two things, reason and compassion, are secretly one thing. But second, Christianity is so full of doublethink, and it's because of certain aspects get emphasized to extremes. Certain aspects get
emphasized
that you can bend them. Yeah. Some rules can be even just outright broken. Hell, even Jesus talks about breaking rules.
Yeah, we've talked about this about like subordinating one verse to another.
Right. So when you talk about like love thy neighbor, but then you come to this understanding of like, oh well, these foreign people are coming into America. They're gonna screw things up. They're gonna misbehave and shit. It's like, I can't logically focus on the negative aspects of a foreign group of people and ignore the negative aspects of my own people. So, which is often how racism just works. It's just confirmation bias. It's like, oh, look at this bad driver. And, the stereotype is that they're Asian. Well, if you only look for bad Asian drivers, you're going to find them, but you're also ignoring all the bad Caucasian drivers and African-American drivers and Indian drivers and any driver. Every group of people's got their assholes.
Yeah, it's cognitive glitches. Our brains are really good at some shit, but, like, the stuff it's bad at, we're also bad. That's the thing. It's not just that our brains are bad at stuff, we're bad at noticing what stuff we're bad at.
Yeah, so it really is a fight you gotta fight yourself to be a good person sometimes.
Well, certainly, I think awareness is like a ground of it. That's like step one, right? Is knowing when you're doing it, right? Mm-hmm. Is knowing when you're being an asshole, or knowing like I'm never gonna pretend that like I have like expunged all like negative aspects of my personality. I'm absolutely certain I've got like biases related to like race and gender and sex and stuff like in me still, and I'm sure that like can like pop up. It was an interesting thing. It's a curious question about, because of the verbiage we use. We say you have a thought. We have an impulse. You have a thought. You have a feeling. I've seen some iterations on that, which is, and I don't know to what degree this is or isn't true linguistically, but it's like an interesting way of thinking about it, is that thoughts are something that happen to you, which I can appreciate where that's coming from, because that way you can like analyze it and be like, okay, this is a thought that's happening to me right now. What am I going to do with it? This is a feeling that's happening to me right now. What am I going to do with it? That kind of thing.
It's actually a very helpful form of therapy to and you have to practice it, but to foster the distinction between thoughts and feelings and your responses to those things or your beliefs about those things. So I once read on crack.com's article in which, and I don't think the woman wrote it, but they wrote it from her perspective. She used to have intrusive thoughts where she'd brutally murder her family. She'd step into the kitchen and just imagine herself stabbing her family members to death with a knife or bludgeoning with a hammer. Part of what she said would help is, one, just let the thoughts be, but two, recognize that you don't have to call those yours. That doesn't have to be a part of you any more than a bee sting is a part of you, or any more than someone insulting you is a part of you. It can be its own isolated thing that just happened to you.
Well, that identification with your thoughts is such a damaging thing. Our mutual friend, my former roommate, used to have a thing on his desk in college that said, "You are not your thoughts." It was something he always wanted to remind himself of. Yeah, he always had that. But I'm going to throw a little bit of shade at Jesus here a little bit. The part of the problem with Christianity is it does have that bit in the gospel where it's talking about, if you think in your heart, or if you have lust for a woman, that's the same as committing adultery, and if you hate someone in your heart, that's the same as murder. I actually do think this is a damaging element of this. I think that verse and like that element of Christianity, that like thoughts and feelings are the same as doing the thing, I think that causes that. I think that's where a lot of that comes from. I think a lot of people's identification with their thoughts comes from those verses.
If I'm being kind to scripture, I would say a misunderstanding of those verses is what causes that. Because if I'm in the mall and a woman walks by and she's just like a 15 out of 10, and I'm like, oh, I feel terrible because I'm attracted. Is that lust? No, I'd say that's not lust. That's just attracted. But if you're like, because there's a certain degree to which we control what we think about, right? I mean, at work, I focus at work on my work things. I'm choosing to think about work things.
But what's the line?
Boring as it? It's a blurred line. But I don't think the point Jesus is making is that there's a line, you gotta see on the other side of it, but there's an intention that belies. It's like greed. Greed isn't the acquisition of money, but it's the ongoing desire for the acquisition of money. You can be a whole a greedy bastard your entire life and be poor, but you're still greedy.
But it's that thing. See, part of the problem. I mean, I have sort of like, I could imagine a better version of this, right? And there is some bits of this in Scripture that they which is guard your thoughts and watch your thoughts. And try not to mentally invest your imaginative. Don't try to invest your imagination and your fantasies in an unhealthy way, because that can lead to bad behavior down the line. Like, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But that direct, the verses in particular I'm talking about are pretty explicit and direct. It's pretty much, if you say in your heart, you fool, actually I think it's rakah, which is some insult. You have committed murder in your heart.
You say in your heart, this motherfucker.
Right. That's too much. Because no, it's not. No, it's not. And also, I think there's like an element of like, you can try to do this, but I feel like there's not as much of an acknowledgement that like, our ability to control our thoughts is deeply flawed and limited.
Oh yeah.
Unless and well, I have a follow up to this. And the other one is it varies considerably to person to person. I don't know that there's unless I want to be this is what a lot of them did actually. Unless I'm willing to be a monk who invests my life into mastering my mind and impulses, I'm never going to stop like thinking about like if I see like a very attractive woman in public, the chances that I'm going to be able to stop myself from thinking about having sex with her, at least for a moment, are practically zero. And the only way I'm going to change that is by dedicating my life to like living in a cell and like prayer and meditation. And some of them did that. That was like an actual. Some of them were like, yeah. So do that. And like, I think the response would be for like, yeah, so do that.
I recall a time you told me of one monk who would have dreams in which she'd have these wild sexual orgies, several women, like these embarrassingly like sexually vivid dreams. And I think there's some story about him chasing demons out and some such, but I guess, well, just reminding you of that, but it also speaks to the idea that, like, repression doesn't work that well. I won't say does it always work, because I used to think repression is just blanket, like, categorically bad. I don't know anymore.
I agree. I see where it's complicated. It's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people that experience things so horrible they've repressed to the point of not even knowing that they've repressed something. And is it healthy to dive into something that you aren't even aware happened to you because your mind just threw away that page?
And it gets into all kinds of weird questions of like, we talk about like violent video games and like people expressing their anger and shit like that. And we also have good evidence that if you like respond violently to anger and like a get it out of your system way, it makes you more angry over the long term. Like we have evidence to say that.
Yes, because you're practicing violence as an outlet to
exactly. People who like beat up a punching bag when they get angry to like get the anger out are like they program themselves to respond to anger with violence.
And so what happens when the punching bag isn't there?
Right. This shit gets complicated, right? Like that's not. I'm not going to pretend like I have a good answer because this is not my like expertise or anything.
Going back to porn, like I don't think anyone thinks looking at porn is virtuous. I think looking at porn, you have a need. People have sexual needs, sexual wants and desires, and you're choosing a route to fulfill that. That one, not even. What am I trying to say? So the availability of pornographic material has exponentially increased within the last 30 years. I mean, 30 years ago, we didn't even have, like, personal computers. Windows 95 came out 28-some years ago.
It's a totally different situation.
I don't even think it's fully 28 years ago, 27-some years ago. But before we had magazines, before they get, you have like private shows, private viewings and such. But it's fulfilling a need in, I don't want to say it's a not wholesome way, but it's a way that can become abused, just like anything can.
Right. I'll never pretend that there's not. I mean, for one thing, certainly pornography as it currently exists has a lot of issues with like misogyny and racism and fetishization. And like, here's the thing: a lot of issues.
It depends on the porn you look at.
Sure, but I mean, I'm talking about the porn industry as a whole. There's a lot of issues with fetishization of youth. A lot of problems. Right? A lot of abuse. This kind of shit. We can talk about pornography as it could exist versus pornography as it does exist. That kind of thing. What the fuck? I feel like both our brains like ran out of tape at the exact same moment.
That's where if we had tea, we'd take a tea break. But
Christ, what are we doing? We have to say words for the audience. They're losing interest. Can you feel it draining away?
Yeah, right out my deck.
I did have more to say, actually. My problem, I want to circle back around to the whole murder in the heart, lust in the heart, thoughts are the same thing as doing the problem. I think that really directly leads into a lot of slut-shaming and a lot of policing of other people's appearances and shit like that. Because if it's a sin to think sexual thoughts about someone, or at least if like that's if it's a sin to lust after someone, yeah, like it is I'm not about to make a moral claim. I'm about to make like a fact claim. If you order me like Bertrand, do not think sexy thoughts about the person who's about to walk into this room, and a woman walks into the room, if she's wearing nothing versus wearing like a nun's habit, it's easier to accomplish that on my end with one of those two scenarios. And so I feel like what this does is if thinking sexual thoughts about someone is a sin, or like hating something, like that kind of shit, I think it leads into policing people's apparel, because it's like, oh, you wearing your short skirts or whatever puts my soul in mortal
it's all
peril.
Projection.
Right, but it's like it puts my soul in mortal peril, because now you're making it harder for me to keep my mind pure, that kind of shit. Right?
Although, to be fair to Jesus, he also said if your eye causes you to sin, you should cut your own eye out.
And that's fair, and I get what he's like, yeah, that's like a Chad thing to say, like, cool, yeah. And like, I get it, like, because in reality, it's like, yeah, it's your responsibility to regulate your responses to other people's apparel, like 100%. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's kind of, I don't know, like, so long as you have that element of lust is, like, even thinking about it, and thinking about that is like sin, I don't know that you can get away from that, you know? Like, I think people are always going to, like, that kind of... I don't think you can have that and get rid of the policing people's appearances.
Sure. Well, I will say this is... Reading verses like that, that's when I remind myself that, like, this is written down, especially if it's the Gospels, decades after Jesus lived, or rather after he died. And, you know, it's gone through the telephone game for literally 2,000 plus years. There's some verses in Scripture where I think to myself, like, that cannot be all Jesus said about that.
Well,
or I would say that the complexity of what's being discussed was reduced down to a few verses, and the dumb thing is to just take the few verses as literally what was said, as though it was all that was said. You know, like the Sermon on the Mount. How long did the Sermon on the Mount last? Did it last as long as the few chapters say it did? I don't know. Jesus could have said so much that didn't get written down. In fact, what is it? Luke even says at the end of Luke, you know, and
if he needed any more things, then he couldn't fill the books with it.
Maybe it was Mark, but yeah, you know, if there was written down everything Jesus did, there wouldn't be enough room in the earth to fit the books. So this, I guess, this just falls along the theory that, like, Scripture is a very, very poor attempt on man's part to accommodate an ever-evolving theology, and not accurately, or at least not completely or conclusively or exhaustively writing down everything Jesus said is part of that.
My response to all this is people can dress with, like, one, you got to deal with your reactions to that and not be an asshole, and probably don't overindulge in, like, really creepy thoughts, but also, like, sex fantasies are going to happen, so don't freak out about it too much, and it's kind of fine.
I will say...
don't go overboard, but, like, if you have sex fantasies about people, it's fine. No one gives a shit. Everybody does it.
Yeah, like, I will say there are times I've learned that, like, a guy had trouble with pornography, felt bad about it, and then learned his girlfriend looked at pornography, and, like, the porn problem got better because it was no longer bad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I watched way less porn once I stopped feeling guilty about it. Like, in a weird reverse way, the guiltier I felt about porn, the more I watched it. And then, like, you like don't get trapped in that anymore. You're like, whatever. I got other shit to do. I got apple pies to bake and video games to play. And honestly, I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. You watch too much porn. You get an addiction to porn. You know what the solution is? Meet real people and fuck them. Honestly, that's way healthier. It's like a social interaction. Get your heart rate up. Way better for you. Meet real people.
See, I have a girlfriend. We have a healthy sexual relationship, but my strategy is to look at so much porn that eventually I get bored of it.
They don't.
I'm almost there.
Bet you're not. Bet you're not.
I've looked at a percent of all the porn that's out there.
Oh God, yeah. Well, it's funny. I've heard of there's a couple versions of this story, like different. Like this superhero power gets shared. I know Freakazoid gets this in like his origin story, but there's some Marvel character gets it too. Of people who like get the entire internet downloaded into their brain. I don't think everyone really appreciates what that would do to a person. You would kill yourself. For one, because you're not just getting all the good shit. You're getting all the dark web, horrible shit that you don't want to see. If you got the entire internet downloaded to your brain, I think you survive a maximum of 10 minutes. I like 100%. Like it's like that. You're gonna bird box yourself. Like immediately after, like I have the whole internet in my brain. It's gonna be like 10 minutes of cat gifs, and then you're gonna kill yourself. Like there's no escaping that.
Oh God, it just brings up. I haven't gone to the dark web. I don't even know how to get to the dark web. You need special shit to get to the dark web, but I've heard of people doing it and like some of the shit they found. Dark.
Yeah, it's the internet.
Like one dude, someone sent him a box. He was doing a dark web unboxing, and it was a stew. And they packed ingredients for the stew, including the chopped up rabbit. By the way, that package was not refrigerated.
What the fuck are you talking?
Some dude was sent a box from the dark web.
What do you mean? Okay, the dark, like just a person?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
A person from the dark, like somewhere.
I'm confused by this. Was this
world.
like an earnest attempt to fuck with someone? Because in my head, this just sounds like someone wanted to do like HelloFresh, but was bad at it. Basically.
No. This is like I forget how the two people actually like communicated this, but some YouTuber, it was just like years ago, some YouTuber made contact with a guy over the dark web, and this dude sent him this stew recipe with the ingredients, including the chopped up rabbit.
Anyway, yeah, the point is...
And that is very light compared to other shit in the dark web.
Well, sure, the whole horror of humanity. Actually, were you ever a Yu Yu Hakusho fan? Don't know why that's funny.
I specifically identified... Wait, is it Yu? That's the one with the dude with big white hair.
What? I mean...
No, I'm thinking of Inuyasha.
Oh, yeah, that's Inuyasha.
Yes, I was a Yu Yu Hakusho fan.
Okay. In Yu Yu Hakusho, a little bit of spoilers, it's the later season, there's a villain. In the world of Yu Yu Hakusho, there are two videotapes. Funnily enough, they're depicted as VHSs. And there's a white tape and a black tape. And basically, one of them, they're like highlight reels of the worst and best of the human species, basically. They're like I think 3 hours long each.
I think I heard of the black tape, and that's what was taken off of Toonami, and that's when I stopped caring.
And there's a super villain. They're meant to be watched as a set, but there's a super villain who watches just the black tape. And so basically it's 3 hours of just the worst things that ever happened. And it convinces him that humans are not like worthy to live, and he like goes genocidal, basically.
Right. And I mean, just think of any horrible, terrible torture. It's probably just 3 hours of that.
Yeah, I will admit, I've gone down like Wikipedia like rabbit holes of just like Googling or like Wikipediaing like torture methods throughout. I can't help it. There's some part of my brain that's like, if I can't look at this full in the face, then I'm not like looking at the world. Is it really like? So there's some part of my brain that like, if I want to understand the world, I need to comprehend its horror. I can't like insulate myself if I want to be wise.
Oh, for me, it's if I'm to be strong-minded and strong-willed,
yeah,
I have to be able to endure this disgusting, gross thing.
Yeah, I get that, and I think it's an interesting thing. You know, I've thought a lot about like different interpretations of like the knowledge of good and evil and the tree and things like that, and there is like something to say about like the burden of knowing about the possibility of bad shit, if that makes any sense, right? Like, once you know about, like, the most horrible torture method in the world, it's like that was always a thing that could happen. like physically that was always possible. There was like the potential there, but now you know about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like a weird burden to bear, you know.
Well, let me tell you about the worst of all those things.
The boats.
Hell.
Oh,
Just plain old-fashioned hell where you're just burning forever.
yeah. I mean, hell is sort of, it's an interesting idea of like you take like the blank slate of bad thing, and then you take the variable of badness and you just ramp it up to infinity. Like that's literally just sit down and like think of the worst thing that ever happened, that could happen. Cool. Infinitely worse. And how long does it go on for? Forever.
Yeah, think of the most. I was going to write a whole book on it. I still intend to. It started off as a blog post, and then it turned into like a manifesto. It's me being very angry at the concept of hell, but part of that, like, and I think, I remember you commented on like, do you believe in a hell that most people don't? And in my mind, it's like, this is the hell that I thought everyone believed in, which is just, think of the absolute worst moment you can. Like, it's not going to get better. There's no hope. It's just, it's a dude shitting diarrhea down your throat while you're being stabbed, while you're on fire, while you're drowning.
And and you're late in your taxes, and the girl at like, but it's everything. It's all the little things. It's like, and the girl turned you down for prom, and you stubbed your toe, and your
family rejected you.
Yeah,
and
everything.
Currently being raped by a lion, and being raped by a bear from the back. An actual bear.
And the lion and the bear have like really shrill, high-pitched, annoying Gilbert Gottfried voices.
Their dicks are made of razors.
And like Baby Shark is playing in the background.
And you're getting paper cuts and all of your between your fingers and toes.
And you're in like an endless line at the DMV while all this is happening.
And you're submerged in lava. Like,
and the lava smells really bad.
And it's never going to get better. It's, in fact,
Mondays. Yeah.
But
real quick, if you guys can't conceive of the brain disease that Theo and I have, sitting in a room trying to think about what hell is like, because you were kind of encouraged to do this as a kid, right? Like, kind of a little bit. Like, I can remember being like, imagine being in hell.
If you remember
like,
from what I wrote, this is actually
your dad,
a big
right?
informative part where I don't know how it came about. I don't remember the rest of the discussion or what came before. But there was a point at church, I remember my dad saying something along the lines of, in hell, worms will eat your body, and you'll be awake for it.
Yeah.
And it was the you'll be awake for it part that got me.
Yeah.
Just conscious, eternal suffering forever. There's no end. There's no relief.
And what's
no
wild
hope.
is your dad in that moment had no idea that he was just casually handing anxiety disorder off on you. Like, he probably thought nothing of it. And it was like 2 seconds, like, here's an anxiety disorder.
Hold on. I won't, like, that didn't give me anxiety. That was, I remember the discussion being, like, purely theological.
Okay.
But, like, hell is the worst conceivable pain for eternity. And Christians think God, like, signed off on this? Like, God thought that was a good idea?
Well, it's an interesting thing conceptually, right? Because there's two...
Jesus Christ!
Well, there's two... Here's the question, right? Because I think a lot of... there's two responses to this, right? Mm-hmm. How far? Or how are we? Where are we at?
We got...
Where are we at, like, time-wise? Oh, we haven't even had 2 hours yet. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, we got time.
What was I going to say? There's two responses, right? Response number one is that, and this is kind of a little bit of the, maybe, it gets complicated. Like, the question of whether God is beholden to his nature is, or whether God is free even beyond that. Because, like, one weird way that people will sometimes constrain God is they'll talk about, like, his nature and, like, his conformity to that kind of thing, which is, like, interesting in one, because some people say this: God couldn't have done anything about hell. That like hell was beyond, like, given like the deep magic of the universe or something, or given like God's nature that like has to respect free will. Hell was
that's the stupidest argument in the world.
Like, basically, that like God's nature insists on the existence of hell, and so in a way it's like God, not even God's choice, that like God, like hell was an inevitable feature of the fundamental nature of the universe.
That's like, let's say I'm a carpenter and I build a bunch of tables, and roughly 85% of them I deem unworthy to continue existing. And instead of destroying that, I tortured the table forever. I'm like,
and there are literally some Christians who are like, yeah, the metaphysical nature of God demands that this be the case. It's like a 2 + 2 = 4 thing for them. Like, yeah, nature of God plus sin equals hell.
Here's the thing.
The math is straightforward. I don't agree with this. I think this is garbage.
If God created a being that had free will such that that creature's free will not only could land it in hell, but according to Christian theology, will likely ended up in hell, God was wrong to create that being.
Which is an interesting question, right? And funnily enough, Jesus confirms your theory. Jesus says explicitly, verbatim, to Judas, about Judas, it would have been better for him had he not been born. That verse actually betrays a really interesting, subtle... Like, that's a little bit of interest, right?
I brought that up to you and your college roommate, though, and both of you said, I think Jesus was just saying this is a really bad thing to do.
And I was wrong about that now. I think, like, now...
Vindication!
Yeah, no, I was wrong. I think, like, the implications of it being a meaningfully existing thing, that there is someone that it would have been better for them not to have existed, begs the question of why do they exist then?
Yeah, why would God create a being who's destined... By the way, he'd know this if you believe classic theology about God's nature, that he's omnipotent or omniscient. Why would God create a being destined for ultimate torture?
Yeah.
That's the most unloving shit you can do.
And I think some people would say that, like, I think the response is, like, in order for free will to be meaningful, it can't simply be the case that God denies the existence of people who are going to make bad decisions. Again, I don't agree with this, but I think that's the standard response.
See, my response to that is, one, when people... I used to believe in, like, radical free will. And I remember talking to Dr. I suppose I shouldn't name him directly. Dr. Frugenheimer. I bet you know what I'm talking about.
Probably. If you keep talking, I'm sure I will.
Curly hair.
Was he Canadian?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember him bringing up the idea that free will just didn't make sense. And at the time, I was like, yeah, but... And I used to argue for conditional or limited free will, which is to say, like, I don't possess the psychological capabilities of murdering my brother. At least certainly not now. Who knows in the future, although I don't suspect it'll ever be the case, ever. But, deciding what to drink at Fazoli's, like, Coke or Pepsi, or, that's well within the range of psychological possibility. But if free will can't be, at least in some way, deterministically explained, then at some point it's just chaotically. It just exists as random chaos.
Right. It's hard. Determinism makes sense as a concept, and pure randomness makes sense as a concept. But, like, the problem with, like, most concepts of free will, with respect to, because there's a cop out that people do. Some people will just rewrite or rephrase or redefine the word free will in a way that, like, it kind of makes the problem go away, but, like, not in a way that's, like, satisfying or, like, what anybody meant. But, like, I heard some people say, like, oh, free will is just the ability to do what you want. It's like, well, cool, thanks. Good job. You've contributed to the conversation. But that's not what any of us were talking about, right? Like, this is not... what most people mean is something... Well, I won't be able to say it. I can't give a good account of what a choice is. Because it seems to be like, it's not determined by anything prior. But it has to be informed by something prior, because otherwise there's randomness, right?
Yeah.
Like, if my behavior isn't informed by prior things, then it's just chaos. But if it's deterministically caused by that, then there's no choice.
Yeah, if at its kernel choices stem from a point of, like, just pure chaos, then one, that isn't even free will. That's at the heart of your soul. Someone's rolling a die, and that determines what you do. that isn't free will any more than saying, "Oh, I was raised this way to believe this way."
Sure.
But second, pure chaos makes sense to someone who isn't omniscient. But for God, that's bullshit. There is no system in the universe that, at least according to classic theology, God does not have complete and utter knowledge of. There is no random for God.
Do you ever think that probably... I think that I have to look at the demographics. It is interesting to think about how demographically there are going to be way fewer people of certain ethnicities in heaven. Like obviously, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be way fewer Japanese people in heaven than, like, other ethnicities. Like, Japanese people are, like, very secular. Not many of them are Christian. The ones who are religious are, like, Shinto or Buddhist for the most part. There's going to be, like, very few Japanese people in heaven compared to, like, every other species. It's just, like, an interesting thing to think about. It's like, yeah, there are a disproportionate number of Japanese people in hell, according to population, according to Christian theology.
Well, if my crackpot theory of all time and space and history is correct, everyone will be in heaven.
Well, it's funny. I always want to do this sketch. I feel like it'd be good in like animation or cartoon, like a Rick and Morty style thing, of like a trip around heaven, and like they're like walking around golden streets, all this sort of thing, and then like they pass like a block, and like in the distance they hear like screams and flame. And he's like, "What's that?" He's like, "Oh, that's hell, where the souls of the sinners are damned forever." And you just hear like screaming in the background.
Horrible, horrific.
And just, ah! And they're like, "Cool." And they like walk around. Like, anyway, you want to meet Mozart? Yeah. And he like walks away, and like in the background you just hear, "Oh God, the bees are in my ass!" And just
actually, I thought at some point I might look to write like if I could, want to write like my own episode of Rick and Morty, and what I wanted to do is each of the main characters at one point gets to play God over their own universe. And like what Rick would do is act out actual Christian God and just see how it happens, just for his own fucking amusement. I was gonna have, I think, Summer wouldn't actually do anything. She'd be like, "Well, I don't believe there's God, so I'm not gonna act as God for this microcosm either." And then, actually, I think Jerry's going to be the one who tried to be an actual, like, good God. And
so he, like, screws it up. I'm imagining in my head, like, he sucks at it. Like, he accidentally creates hell by trying to be good God.
Something like that. But, basically it's just a chance to see, like, oh, if you could be God, what would you do? And, have all of them try their hand at it. And I actually think I would have Beth be the one who tries to perfect it and screws it up.
Okay, I can see that. That actually might track a little bit. Well, they have. I'm trying to think. Isn't there? I think there's an episode where Beth like starts running a city. I think.
So
and then like there's like a Zeus character that shows up. So I can't remember all the details.
Rick fucks a planet.
Okay.
And they just use the name Gaia. And the planet, like, through semi-volcanic action, gives birth to like thousands of these rock people who kind of look like Rick. They look closer to like cookies, just 3-dimensional cookies. But anyway, like Rick and Beth start structuring it, and
that's right. That
becomes their own little like Sid Meier's Civilization game going on.
And they do a good job of it, if I remember correctly.
They do, but then
doesn't like Jerry fuck it up?
Jerry, it's not actually his fault. Jerry ends up falling to the machine. He gets labeled as a useless, and he's kicked out of the society along with all the other useless ones.
Oh, that's right.
Like, these are engineers, these are teachers, these are scientists. But he ends up bringing a rebellion of all the useless ones after.
He gets magic somehow, right? I can't remember.
He does.
Magic.
Well, later on, spoilers. Later on, it turns out the actual god who fucked the planet shows up, and I think he gives Jerry a magical rod,
right,
to do stuff. But anyway, Shall we get to chapter 15?
Yeah, this one's a short one. You just want to read it yourself? It's only like 9 verses, I think.
An oracle concerning Moab.
And this motherfucker over here.
I forgot you! Oracle concerning Moab. Because Ar is laid waste in the night, Moab is undone. Because Kir is laid waste in the night, Moab is undone. Daughter Dibon has gone up to the high places to weep. Over Nebo and over Medeba, Moab wails. Every head is shaved, every beard is shorn. Signs of mourning and such. In the streets they bind on sackcloth, on the housetops and in the squares. Everyone wails and melts in tears. Heshbon and Elieleh cry out. Their voices are heard as far as Jahaz. Therefore the loins of Moab quiver. His soul trembles. My heart cries out for Moab. His fugitives flee to Zor. To Eglath Shelishah.
Good job.
I practiced that yesterday. For at the ascents of Luhith, they go up weeping. On the road to Horonaim, they raise a cry of destruction. The waters of Nimrim are desolation. The grass is withered. The new growth fails. Vegetation is no more. Therefore, the abundance they have gained and what they have laid up, they carry away over the Wadi of the Willows. For a cry is gone around the land of Moab. The wailing reaches Eglaim. The wailing reaches the Bir Elim. For the waters of Dibon are full of blood. And I guess Dibon sounds like the Hebrew word for blood, so a bit of a pun there. For the waters of Dibon are full of blood, yet I will bring upon Dibon even more. A lion for those of Moab who escape, for the remnant of the land.
So, yeah, a short and sweet little fuck you for this one. What is Wadi of the Willows, I wonder? There's a lot of, like, regional geographic shit in this one. I'm not sure. Wadi of the Willows.
Another name for the brook of the Arabah. Less than 10% confidence. Okay, wow.
Does Wadi mean river?
Wadi, in certain Arabic-speaking countries, a valley, a ravine, or channel that is dry except in the rainy season.
Okay, so sometimes it's a river.
Alright, so I assume this is saying even in the rainy season, there's not going to be anything.
Okay, gotcha. I feel like there's not a lot to say about this one that isn't covered by, like, almost all of them. This does get a bit repetitive after a while of just, like, again, there's only so many times you could like, point at a country, but, like, I'm gonna fuck you up, and I'm gonna fuck you up, and I'm gonna fuck you up.
But if you look at porn, there's so many ways you can fuck.
Well, at least, like, porn is visually interesting, but, like, this is, like, I don't know. Yeah, there's like I got nothing to say. It's just like I do think his balls quivering is very funny. Yeah, that's really what that is, right? It's saying like, yeah, he's so scared his balls are shivering. Is basically.
Oh God!
Right, I'm not. It's just me. I'm pretty sure that's what that means.
The loins of Moab quiver.
Yeah, he's calling him like he's almost. He's like a couple of etymological steps away from calling him a quivering pussy.
Quiver dick.
Now I'm just imagining like anyway. Every head is shaved, every beard is shorn. Morning shit. Can you go to the bottom a little bit? Waters of Nimrim or desolation. Yeah, he's just gonna fuck him up. I mean, it's not a lot to say about it. I'd actually be fine going on to the next chapter if you want to see.
Let's do it.
We can fit one more in. How many?
I was thinking we should do 4 at a time.
You can do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Here. All right. You read it.
How many verses is it?
It is only 13.
All right. I'll just take it.
All right.
I'll tell you when to scroll down. Okay. So I think this is still talking about Moab here because there's no distinction. Yeah. Okay. 1 second. Chapter 16, verse 1. Send lambs to the ruler of the land from Selah by way of the desert. To the mount of daughter Zion, like fluttering birds, like scattered nestlings, so are the daughters of Moab at the fords of the Arnorn. This does sound very Tolkien. Give counsel, grant justice, make your shade like night. At the height of noon, hide the outcasts. Do not betray the fugitives. Let the outcasts of Moab settle among you, be a refuge to them from the destroyer. When the oppressor is no more and destruction has ceased and marauders have vanished from the land, then a throne shall be established in steadfast love in the tent of David. So we're talking about Judah there and Jerusalem. And on it shall sit in faithfulness a ruler who seeks justice and is swift to do what is right. We have heard of the pride of Moab. How proud is he, of his arrogance, his pride, and his insolence. His boasts are false. Therefore let Moab wail, let everyone wail for Moab. Mourn, utterly stricken, for the raisin cakes of Kir Hareseth. That's a weird line. For the fields of Heshbon languish and the vines of Sibmah, whose clusters once made drunk the lords of the nations, reached to Jazer and strayed to the desert. Their shoots once spread abroad and crossed over the sea. Therefore I weep as Jazer weeps for the vines of Sibmah. Almost Simba. I drench you with my tears, O Heshbon and Elealeh. For shout over your fruit harvest. For the shout over your fruit harvest and your grain harvest has ceased. Joy and gladness are taken away from the fruitful field, and in the vineyards no exultation is heard, no shouts are raised, no treader treads out wine in the presses, the vintage shout is hushed. Therefore my heart moans like a harp for Moab, and my very soul for Kir Hares. Verse 12. When Moab presents himself, when he wearies himself upon the high place, when he comes to his sanctuary to pray, he will not prevail. This was the word the Lord spoke concerning Moab in the past. Verse 14. But now the Lord says, in 3 years, like the years of a hired worker, the glory of Moab will be brought into contempt in spite of all its great multitude, and those who survive will be very few and feeble. Interesting that it tells, I assume, the people in Judah to protect the refugees of Moab. Am I reading that right? Let the outcasts of Moab settle among you, be a refuge to them from the destroyer. But who's the destroyer here? I thought God was the destroyer. Well, I mean, God's using someone.
And verse 3 and 4 are in quotes. Who are they quoting?
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Fluttering bird, like screaming. Send the lambs to the road of the land. I think this is being said to the ruler of the land, namely Moab. Give counsel, grant justice, make your shade like night at the height of noon.
I thought Moab was the country. I'm pretty sure Moab's the country.
Yeah, but I think this is being spoken to the leader of Moab.
Okay.
Well, no, because it says, hide the outcast, do not betray the fugitive, let the outcasts of Moab settle among you. So I suppose this is being said to
people of Judah.
People of Judah, yeah.
Okay, that's just interesting
to them from the destroyer.
I mean,
God's the destroyer.
It's still kind of more of the same of Moab's going to be destroyed for its arrogance, right? Like, I don't know. I wish I had some deep theological analysis of this, but it just seems like more of the same, to be honest.
I'll admit, I feel like a lot of Isaiah is going to be like this, just, and fuck you, just in more eloquent terms.
Honestly, let's go on to verse 17. Or chapter 17. Fuck it. Let's see if we get some more interesting things. Well, right. Wait, we're on to Damascus now. Oh, yay. I think Damascus is in modern-day Syria.
How they get fucked.
How many verses in this one?
14.
Oh, yeah, take it away.
Verse 1. An oracle concerning Damascus. See, Damascus will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins. Her towns will be deserted forever. There will be places for... snuck in like a Trump accent. It will become a heap of ruins. Her towns will be deserted forever. There will be places for flocks, which will lie down, and no one will make them afraid. The fortress will disappear from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Aram will be like the glory of the people of Israel, says the Lord of hosts. On that day, the glory of Jacob will be brought low, and the fat of his flesh will grow lean, essentially. And it shall be as when reapers gather standing grain, and their arms harvest the ears, and as when one gleans the ears of grain in the valley of Rephaim. Gleanings will be left in it, as when an olive tree is beaten, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the highest bough, 4 or 5 on the branches of a fruit tree, says the Lord God of Israel, which the imagery probably makes a lot more sense for people who tend to olives. On that day, verse 7, on that day people will look to their Maker with their eyes on the Holy One of Israel. They will not have regard for the altars the work of their hands, and they will not look at what their own fingers have made, either the sacred poles or the altars of incense. On that day their fortified cities will be like the deserted places of the Hivites and the Amorites, which they deserted because of the people of Israel, and there will be desolation. For you have forgotten God your Savior, and have not remembered the rock of your refuge. Therefore, though you plant pleasant gardens and set out branches of a foreign god, though you make them grow on the day that you plant them and make them blossom in the morning that you sow, yet the harvest will flee away in a day of sickness and incurable pain. Woe, the thunder of many peoples, they thunder like the thundering of the sea. The roar of the nations, they roar like the roaring of mighty waters. When the nations roar like the roaring of many waters, he will rebuke them, and they will flee far away, chased like chaff on the mountains before the wind, and like whirling dust before the storm. At evening time, sudden terror. Before morning, they are no more. This is the fate of those who despoil us, and the lot of those who plunder us. Jesus, I'm getting like... What's the... Adam's Family. Family Crest, family motto. We would feast on those who would seek to undo us, or something like that.
Is that the motto of the Addams Family? Like the comedy bit?
And it's family motto. The credo, of the Addams Family is Sic gorgiamus allos subjectatus nunc, or we gladly feast on those who would subdue us.
I kind of love that. So fun fact real quick, go up to the top where it says Damascus will cease to be a city and become a heap of ruins. Mm-hmm. Damascus is right now the capital of Syria. As far as I can tell, Damascus has never not been inhabited. So that's actually interesting. Do we have direct confirmation here of a prophecy that never came to pass? As far as I'm aware, the city of Damascus has been continually occupied since this time. I don't think there's been a single moment where it's been unoccupied. The Romans conquered it. A bunch of people conquered
History it. History of Damascus.
I mean, you're looking at thousands of years of history here. Founded in the 3rd millennium BCE.
By virtue of its geographical position at the crossroads of the Orient and the Occident, between Africa and Asia, the old city of Damascus is considered to be among the oldest continually inhabited cities of the world.
Yeah. It's literally...
I believe UNESCO.org.
Yeah, I wonder if... I kind of want to, I kind of wonder... God, that could actually be how... I'm going to need to look more into this. I'm going to see if there's any conversation about this anywhere.
You're going to break Christianity?
It'd be really wild if this was the straw that broke... If I would just, hopped into, I don't know, Christianity, the Christianity subreddit, be like, hey guys, I have confirmation of a prophecy that never came true.
No,
really straightforward. Good
luck getting past the double think. I still remember the time you emailed the pastor about and he's one of those shithole pastors where not just 85% of everyone's going to hell. It's 99.9999994%.
You talking to me?
Yeah, you emailed that pastor. He was from one of the super hateful churches.
Did I do that? I believe
you emailed him about a rabbit creature or a hare chewing the cud.
Oh,
and
right.
So, hares don't chew cud. And then this dude just came back well, back then they did, or perhaps there was a type of hare that did, and now is extinct.
I forgot about that. Oh God, my memory. That's wild. Anyway, point is, Damascus never happened. It's totally fine and has continued to be fine.
We did, literally 2 minutes of research. Let's hold off on saying it never happened, but...
Alright, as far as I can tell, it has been continuously occupied and has never ceased to be a city.
I'll say it's likely.
I'll do some research. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was... If some fuck is, actually there was, a month in, 1002 where, no one lived there. It's you motherfucker. This is the problem with prophecies on a multi-thousand-year time scale.
Yeah, even if how long would it have to be uninhabited for the prophecy to be considered?
Yeah, if there's 2 seconds when no one's in it. I don't know.
All right, what about a year? I could see a city being abandoned for a year due to war.
Big ass prophecies.
There's a lot of cities that get abandoned due to war, I assume.
Well, do you know what cold reading is?
Cold reading?
Mm-hmm.
No, I do not.
It's a mentalist and spiritualist technique used in a lot of... It's a charlatan's technique where like mediums will basically like talk to like a crowd of people, and they'll ask specific questions that are open-ended enough, and then they get more specific. Like a lot of them will be like, you know, anything like, I'm getting an H. Does Chris, or like, I'll get a Christopher. Does Christopher mean anything to someone? And someone pipes up, Christopher was my dad. Christopher is a really common name. The odds of there being someone named Christopher. Yeah. And if it doesn't work out, they just switch gears. Like, oh, maybe it's Christy. And then you just say some bullshit like, oh, yeah, I get this feeling you get heart problems. Heart problems are so common. Like, everybody's got heart problems if they live long enough.
Yeah, I saw it explained where someone used 9/11. Like, does someone here, someone who lost 9/11? And this was like 2004, so we're all like very keenly aware of 9/11 still.
Yeah, well, actually, could you do me a favor? Can you Google how many people in room before shared birthday?
People in room before shared birthday.
What was that? 23. So, yeah, that's how the math works out. If you can get 23 people in the room, there's a 50-50 chance of at least 2 people having the same birthday. So just, like, little shit like that, like, you get a crowd of big enough people, and you can just say a birthday, like, February 15th. Is that significant to anyone? Yeah, probably.
It's Valentine's.
Is that? No.
14th. No, 14th.
Yeah, you son of a bitch.
It's also my friend's birthday, John.
Oh, good for him. Yeah, but going back to the chapter itself, similar situation, more destruction. This one is at least a little bit more interesting because there's some stuff going on here that I think there's something going on here. So verse 9, on that day the fortified cities will be like deserted places of the Hivites and Amorites, which they deserted because of the people of Israel, and there will be desolation. But then verse 10, for you have forgotten God your Savior, and have not remembered the rock of your refuge. Therefore, though you plant pleasant gardens and set out branches of a foreign god. I thought we were talking about Damascus. This sounds like it's talking about Israel there, right? Did it switch gears and I didn't notice?
Trying to see where it would have switched if it did. I don't think it did. Although it does say up here, verse 4, on that day the glory of Jacob will be brought low, and the fat of his flesh will grow lean.
So maybe literally in verse 4 it switches over. Nah, it's in Syria.
Southwest Syria, yeah.
Yeah, it's like literally maybe verse 4 switches. Like verse 3 is the fortress. Well, no. Disappear with Ephraim. Ephraim is Israel. Why is this saying? Wait, hold on. Did I just? Oh, yeah. Bible shit does this where it, like, confusing. You miss it. So see, Damascus used to be a city. Her towns will be deserted. The fortress will disappear from Ephraim. That's northern Israel. Mm-hmm. And the kingdom from Damascus. The remnant of Aram will be like the glory of the people of Israel, says the Lord of hosts. And then verse 4, on that day the glory of Jacob will be low. Wait, the glory of Jacob. Is that a reference somehow to Syria in a way? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think there's a connection there. Gleanings be left in it. On the branches, on that day the people look to their Maker with their eyes in the Holy One of Israel. They will have not regard for the altars, the work of their hands. They will not either say, on that day you're forgotten. Yeah, am I wrong? That's confusing, right? That's weird.
That is confusing.
It like subtly switches maybe to talking about Israel from Damascus.
A quandary we have. If only we'd gone to a Christian college and studied this specifically.
I think I had my Isaiah class with. I think I had an Isaiah class. I think I know who it was too. There was like one Old Testament guy who was like the Old Testament guy.
Yeah.
We might have to bleep that later. Yeah, can you scroll down a little bit? Yeah, because they say, set up branches of a foreign god. That seems like it's talking about Israel there. Woe, the thunder of many peoples. They thunder. At evening time, a sudden terror. Before morning, they are no more. This is the fate of those who despoil us, and the lot of those who plunder us. I wonder. Again, we're still stuck in the vibe of pointing at different country. Like literally, we're up to how many now? So we've got Assyria, and I think Damascus might be in Assyria. Actually, that makes sense. I think Damascus might be in Assyria. I think. I'm not 100% about that. So you've got like Damascus, maybe Assyria. You've got Aram. You've got Moab. You've got Babylon. You've got Philistines. Like literally, just everyone around them, just being like, and fuck you, and fuck you, and fuck you, and fuck you. And to be fair, they were all probably fucking with Israel because everybody was fucking with everybody, or Judah.
And even Israel isn't free from criticism. There's plenty of verses about God specifically punishing Israel,
and yet still favoring them. You know,
yeah.
It's such a wild thing. It's I don't know.
Again, I think we're at. This is written in a point in history where collectively we as humans are still fighting with that like nationalism versus universalism or globalism.
Do you say then we're still dealing with that?
We still are, but
so we've never stopped.
It's much more concrete here.
I don't even. Yeah.
Jesus. For God so loved the whole world that he gave his only begotten Son, versus for God so loved this one country.
Yeah, which to be fair is a really radical theological tone shift for that is probably there are a few big important theological shifts when you get to the Gospels and the Christ stories and the figure and all that. Regardless of historicity one way or the other, I'm just talking about the theology itself. In an embrace of a more this is for everybody, Jew and Gentile, that kind of thing. Although, how much does Jesus himself do that though? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Paul certainly says a lot of that of for the Jew first and also for the Greek. That's a lot of Paul, and you do have John that. But how much does Jesus actually talk about? Does Jesus ever talk about saving Gentiles? I'm trying to think.
It's implied, but when he talks to the woman of the well, she was a Samaritan.
Yeah, right. And wasn't there the guard captain, the centurion?
Yep.
So there's a little.
Today I say salvation's come upon your house.
Yeah, there's a dusting of that in there. But
I might be thinking of who's the wee little man?
Zacharias.
Or Zacchaeus, wasn't it?
Zacchaeus, thank you. Was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree.
To see.
I think it was for the Savior he wanted to see. Zacchaeus, get your ass down here.
What the fuck?
Or I'm going to your house today. What a wild, as a kid this seems normal. Imagine, I'm trying to think of what the version of this would be. I'm trying to think of what's a modern version of a guru or a teacher or something like that. What's the closest modern incarnation of a Christ figure?
Oh, alright. I was about to be Instagram influencer.
Well, kinda. Yeah, I was honestly thinking in terms of how people treat him, a Jordan Peterson, or I'm just talking in terms of how people treat him and how he presents himself, not necessarily the effects of his behavior or anything like that. I'm just trying to think.
I only think of negative things Joe Rogan, Elon Musk.
Yeah, which there is a weird. It's funny actually.
I should say, I think Joe Rogan gets more shit. Look, let me be very specific. There's things on Joe Rogan's podcast that are very good, but there's things that are very bad. And
right.
He deserves the shit for those things.
He's a very mixed bag. But it's interesting. Actually, there's a streamer I watch a lot that's been talking about this lately, about how the online advice, in self-help space, is so dominated by conservative figures, and that. You got Jordan Peterson, you got Andrew Tate, you've got the Fresh and Fit podcast. So much.
I heard Andrew Tate was recently
arrested. Yeah, cool. That's probably. I mean, he's almost allegedly he's a sex trafficker and allegedly a rapist and allegedly. Wow, he's not allegedly a piece of shit. That one's, I feel comfortable saying that.
He's proud to be misogynist.
Yeah, very much so.
Do you
see how horrible, fake converted to Islam.
Did he?
Yeah, because Islam's like not cucked like Christianity is. I think he thinks it's just bullshit like that. Or whatever. But yeah, I think that streamer's onto something about how much the online like advice and self-help space is dominated by like right figures. But my point being, to illustrate my final point, just like imagine like a life coach type, like a famous life coach pointing at someone in the audience, like, I'm staying at your house tonight. Right?
I could believe someone would pull a stunt like that.
Yeah, maybe.
Although, like, if someone did, I suspect it was prearranged.
But it's
Oh, but I was going to say, I read a tweet thread. I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Imgur, which it's very leftist. Not that I am particularly critical of that, but well, sometimes they get a bit rabid. But yeah, someone posted a tweet thread in which someone said, conservatives, like the operating principle is that we like to tell you what to do, we don't like being told what to do. And a life coach is that perfect position to tell someone what to do and to assume that no one needs to tell you what to do because you're the life coach.
Right. I mean, it's always the physician heal thyself self bullshit, right?
Yeah.
It's... Oh, God, I had a thought. So I believe for Isaiah 1 through 39 is proto Isaiah. I don't think we could do it justice right now. But could you just peek at the next chapter? I just want to see what it is. Is it more picking fights with countries? Yeah, it's another one. Oh, let's see how far.
7 verses.
An oracle concerning Cush. So the next one is fuck Cush. Let's just keep going. An oracle concerning Egypt. So fuck Egypt.
Although Egypt, Assyrian, Israel blessed.
Okay, that's cool. What's the next one? Isaiah dramatizes the conquest of Egypt and Cush. Okay, so maybe we're getting out of it at this point. We're getting into some different... Nope, right back to it. Right back.
Babylon, Edom,
and Arabia. Jesus. How long do we have to go before it's not just picking fights with random
Oracle concerning Duma, Oracle concerning the desert plain. Just in case any homeless motherfuckers who thought they were safe.
Fuck you, and then for anybody I missed... Fuck the rest of the planet and everyone on it.
Caravans of Dedanites, not Deadites.
I was gonna say
Dedanites, D-E-D-A, night.
Dedanites.
Inhabitants of the land of Tima. How long does
it go? A warning of destruction of Jerusalem. Okay.
Fucking them.
Oh, I think we actually might be out of it here. Denunciation of self-seeking officials. I think we might be out of just
well, that's at least it's not local.
Yeah.
Region-based.
Nope, never mind. Never mind.
Concerns here in chapter 23.
Right back to it.
Chapter 24.
Impending judgment on the earth. Christ, we get it. We get it. They're bad and you're going to kill them. You've said it. You've beat this horse to death. And not just beat it to death. You have stabbed it and burned it and hit it with lightning and slaughtered its children.
Children's children.
Like, we get it. What's next? Oh my God, we're in chapter 24 now.
Well, this does look interesting. I do want to read that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, praise for deliverance from oppression. Okay, so that's...
Although the Moab, verse 10, part 2, the Moabites shall be trodden down their place.
As straw is trodden down
to fucking them over, Judah's song of victory.
Okay, so at this point, we are a little bit, like, bit by bit getting out of it. We won't be too long. I wonder if maybe we can power through some of these next time. I just can't believe how much... I don't think as a kid, I don't think I ever really picked up on how much of Isaiah is just shit-talking. It's just trash talking every country. Just every country. It's just like, imagine a U.S. president be like, the Canadians are bad-smelling, hairy, poutine-eating fuckwits. Flips the page. Mexicans, don't like them. Their food gives me gas. Fuck the Mexicans. Flips the page. The French, they're too full of themselves. Just pages and pages and pages of, like, every member of the UN Security Council. Everyone of the
I almost want you to keep going just so I can learn your inner thoughts about all these countries.
the Brits, the Brits, their food is bad, and their engineering is bad, and they're over obsessed with the monarchy, and they talk funny. Flip the page.
The Congo Republic. They could learn a lot, man.
The Japanese, they terrify me with their kawaii, big-eyed anime. I think it's scary. I don't like it. They're going to destroy us with giant robots. I'm the president in this case. I don't think we can have. Could you imagine having a president who was like openly like, yeah, I love Naruto, man. Like a person running for president who like fucking.
We got to get to Gen. We got to get a Gen Z or millennial president eventually.
Oh god, I don't know how we're gonna do it. I've thought about this, and I think I've talked this before. And no one. It's a little weird to me how no one's like saying it out loud too much. If you want to run for office, like if you're a kid now, you want to run for the office, you got to decide that at 5 years old and live the rest of your life with that in mind. Like I've said shit on Facebook that I could never run for office. I've Google searched shit. Like Google knows, like the fact that I've wanted to know how many calories an adult human male body. I can never get elected. Google will blackmail me with that shit.
George, what's his name? George Santos.
Yeah,
got elected. Lied about everything.
He's not Jewish. He didn't go to.
He said he was Jew-ish.
Yeah, like Jew-esque. He's like, I've been in rooms with Jewish people, and I really like.
Lauren Boebert only has a GED. No disrespect for anyone else. One of the smartest guys I know on the planet. Like went head to head with a top Magic the Gathering player, nearly won. Magic the Gathering. He only has a GED. But it's just saying, like, you
just lie about it?
People know. Although, yes, she might have lied. She probably lied about it. I don't fucking lie. Although, I assume some lie more than others. I would check. I don't want to say all of them lie.
I
hold out hope for.
I feel comfortable that every sitting Republican.
Ocasio-Cortez.
Let's talk about Republicans. There's a handful of Democrats. So, Ocasio-Cortez seems good. Bernie's good. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, they seem decent. There's a handful. We'll do all right.
I'd even say I don't know if they're in Congress, but there's some respectable Republican, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think he's technically Republican, but has a lot of progressive policies that he supports.
Could be worse. You could do a lot worse than Arnold Schwarzenegger. A lot of shit that I still have big issues with.
Not perfect, but
at least he's not like a fascist.
Yeah, but then like you look at like when Trump came along and the people that just went right along on Trump's train, just lie after lie after lie, lied nationally, lied about not tweeting about China. Remember that during the debate?
Well, it's
Hillary Clinton.
It's gotten so bad in this country with respect to with like shared senses of information, I guess, it's like trust and expertise is at an all-time low, and like it's like a weird. A lot of this is like epistemological, like we're running into like issues of how to know things, and like media. Well, one thing, part of the problem is I feel like we're not equipped. There's a certain skill set that you need, I think, to navigate information online, and like the internet came so hard and fast on society.
No, it did.
It just it dropped like a bomb on society, and like none of us like really knew what the fuck to do with it. Like literally, the first like couple decades of the internet, it grew so fast, faster than our like social conventions could keep up.
The .com boom.
But it was crazy, and like unfortunately, like I think I've talked about this before. I don't know if I think you and me, but I don't know if on the podcast where the imagine that you have two people, right? I can't remember if I've said this on the podcast before, but 2 people, and their job is to write statements, to make sentences, like literally make sentences.
Yep.
And one of them,
that's my job,
is you can only say true sentences, and the other one has no such constraint. And then you just analyze a sentence per minute rate. The person who doesn't have to care about truth will outstrip the truth teller by I can't even fathom. Like, imagine you're like 2 people and you're like, I need a 3-page essay on some battle in like Roman history. You have to tell the truth. I don't give a fuck about you telling the truth. This person has to like look shit up and like cite shit, and this person could just make it up. So I guess this is weird thing where we're running into like literal, like, it's like a timing thing. Like, it takes less time to lie than to tell the truth, and so the lies outnumber the truth.
Right. And the thing about the internet is it's absolutely geared towards getting it's very shallow, very fast, that memes are the very definition of that. It's a single image, sometimes no words, sometimes few words. Granted, I think we've come to the point where, like, I don't know if anyone trusts memes as a solid source of information.
But boomers do. I don't want to be like, I don't want to be ageist, but like a little bit boomers do though.
I will say there's the tendency, just like a soundbite, can spread. Like what was the experiment done? I think a journalist. She made up the fact that people on average eat like 7 or 8 spiders a year in their sleep. And we just fucking believe that. And for like, I remember that in high school. We were like, "Do you guys know
Wait,
this?"
that was a deliberate lie?
That was a deliberate lie, tested to see how fast it would travel.
Jesus, I didn't know that. Yep. That's crazy.
No, and everyone knows you eat up to 300.
Well, and and the do you know what it is though? It's we never emphasized the moral necessity of education. We approached education as a society and like reason and like the ability to learn and reason and research. We approached that as a like thing that you do to get a job. Like school, you go to school to get a job.
Very utilitarian towards that specific.
That it's like education is for a job, reason is for a job. There is a moral component to education and to reasoning capabilities and to research, because if you don't do that, then you're going to believe bullshit, and if you believe bullshit, you're gonna hurt people.
That's why we're philosophers.
But
do the opposite.
Honest to God, that is
and struggle to get a job.
Honest to God, that is one of the roles I think philosophy can play in the modern society. I think philosophy is more important than ever in a sense. And what I mean by that is the practice and skill of reason and analysis is more important than it's ever been. And people suck at it.
Even philosophers suck at it.
Oh, yeah, so much. Audience, fuck us. Like, who cares? Yeah, don't give a shit about us. What, you think we're smart? Fuck you.
You think I'm an authority on anything?
I think we need to wrap it up. So, folks, we'll be popping back into this as soon as we can to continue with the book of Isaiah and to bring you quality content. You wanna take us out?
Dude, thanks for checking with us. As always, like, share, subscribe, make an altar. Who knows? However you want to express your gratitude, we appreciate it.
We don't want to tell you how to live your life.
Don't we, though?
We secretly want to.
But this is Theophalon.
And this is Bertrand.
And we're signing off.
Be good to yourselves and to each other, folks.